Okay, Madam Chair, you just have to press.
I unmuted. Perfect. Thank you. Welcome, everyone.
You might need the microphone.
Let me know if I need the microphone. Or, John Morgan, can you hear us okay on Zoom?
I can hear you, yes.
Okay, so it may be the other room if they have any trouble. We use the mic, otherwise it's a lot of trouble, as you've seen us struggle with. I'd like to call this meeting to order of Thursday, September 5th, 2024. It's the Madison Planning and Zoning Commission. With us tonight on the commission are Bob Reinhardt, John Dusa, Andy Rubin, myself, Carol Snow Chair, Mike Bugda, and Jeff Downs. And we have joining us on Zoom, John Morgan, Commissioner. The first item on our agenda tonight is the Plan of Conservation and Development update. And I don't know, Erin, if you want to give a quick overview, or Bob Reinhardt, if you want to add comments.
Sure.
To what we've done since the last meeting.
Yes, to kick us off. So at the last meeting, which was about a month ago, the commission asked to have all of the public, the written comments uploaded and have time to review those, and also time to consider what the public comments were submitted during the hearing. So we've done that, discussed some of those recommended changes. I've met with John Guskowski, our consultant, to try and find locations where we could add some of those common themes that came back through us. And so this redlined document is the revised version. And one of the biggest changes you'll see, and sort of a lot of our conversation was to try to front load the document with more meat, more substance, so that you didn't have to go looking through the entire document, looking for some of the policies and proposed actions. So we did have some commission members assist in that drafting. That was Bob and John Morgan, and John Dusa also added some language to our conclusion to make that a little more succinct. So we could go through those changes and see if anybody had discussion or comments. I did send this out to you earlier and did not receive any feedback. Negative feedback, I should say. We had nice feedback. So the hope for this evening was to go through, to have consensus on the document and to adopt the document. You have worked on this plan for 2 years. It was September of 22 that we began this journey. So many of you came on the commission during the process, and we had learning curves and edits and changes of format, and I think you came out with a great document. The only caveat I would say is that if we come up with, if you're okay with the substance and we see some grammatical errors prior to printing, that we would just correct those as we move forward. We noted one where we had in our contents the executive summary, which we did call it an executive summary and then changed that wording to overview. So minor things like that, and spacing and whatnot.
Great, thanks. Bob, did you want to add anything to it about
I was
changes
just,
and updates?
yeah, so the couple of things. One was we know the demographic data is not current, but it's the most current we get. So posing the idea that once the new demographic data is available, probably from the state, we can update the POCD. I don't think it's going to make a big difference on what we drafted as far as policies and goals and like. At least then update it and get something a little more current. That's one thing.
Excuse me, Bob, we have a request for you to use the microphone
Oh, sure.
because folks in the other room and online can't hear quite as clear. Because you're further from the.
Okay, so just to recap, the demographic data we have in the report is a little out of date. It is the most recent we can get, but it is somewhat out of date. We realize that. And we want to start looking for new data. Once we get that and it's good data, then we'll update the POCD. And we don't expect any real changes, but just to keep the document living and real. And if there is a big change, then we'll have to address what that might mean for the policies and the goals that we set. That's one. Second one was what Said about the errata, there are a number of grammatical issues, carriage returns, spaces, spelling mistakes that don't change the substance of the document, but we can fix once it's been adopted, and we will not need to re-adopt it. We'll just go with it. It's not going to change any side document. I think there's an opportunity for us, and something I thought we should discuss is that when future demographic data is available, if it does require an update to the document, that we then take that opportunity to potentially reorganize the structure of the document. I think the information in the document is good. Everything we need is there. I just don't think it's very readable. It's written policy, right? I want to write it more for the general public. So I think we have a chance to really just kind of restructure how it flows, not really changing any of the words, just changing how it works and make that much easier. I promise not to change too many words.
I'm not
Last thing-
interested.
And the last thing is, most of the changes, I think, before the policies aren't all that substantive. Because it's really background information, but there were several changes to policies which I think you all should look at
We should highlight those.
and highlight those and then discuss some of them. So I received it, when you guys received it, I just worked on the front end. And there are some things in there that I'm not sure I agree with, having changed and included, so I'd like to discuss it. I don't have a strong opinion, I just want to open it up.
Would you like me to pull them up on the screen?
Yeah.
I also want to just add, both what Aaron and Bob said, that we got a lot of really good feedback, and we incorporated what we thought were the kind of appropriate points, where we found them applicable. And there were some, though, that seemed so granular or specific, or even maybe not appropriate for the POCD, but something for the Board of Selectmen to
Yeah.
consider, or somebody else. But so if you submitted requests for updates to us and didn't see them getting included, that may be the reason. I think generally, I think we felt that some of our overarching policies covered a lot of what people recommended to us.
Yeah, I would say that it's not early on in the creation of the document, midway through, but it's when we all started working on it. We made a decision to remove some of the specifics from the document, because the document is more higher level. We didn't want to micromanage and then assign people to say, we need someone to look at this aspect of how the town is structured, give us the details, because we're not the expert on it. So when we receive specific requests, if we found that that request was embedded in some of the language we had, we decided not to put it in there, because it takes you down a bit of a rabbit hole, getting how specific and mandating things. We're not sure we should mandate. We don't have the background or the expertise to say we have to do this. So that's kind of how we left it. We left it more.
So is that in getting to more of a regulatory language that you're seeing in some of my granular suggestions? Is that-
Sometimes, yes. Sometimes the issues were so specific and also not really appropriate to this document, I would say. Aaron, maybe you could fill in.
So I think some more specific tasks or referencing, I think as we scroll through, I can show you some examples where we felt the language was already included in a broader.
And I think once, because when you get into the
Action.
implementation table, we will provide those assigned with completing whichever the strategic initiatives are, with all of the feedback from the public input. So they have all that information. It's just not included in the document.
It maybe didn't elevate up to the policies.
So the first edit that was suggested under policy A, which is to create an accessible community that fosters easy connections among residents for gatherings, shopping, working, recreation, dining, and relaxing. That was under action item 1, subsection B. The previous language was protecting and enhancing public access to natural resources in the downtown area. And there was a suggestion to include key cultural resources, and then a specific example of the Scranton Memorial Library was added, and that was in response to the board of directors or trustees for the library's suggestion. And I think that was one, Bob, that you wanted to comment on.
I'll share the microphone with anyone else. But for this one, I like the idea of including the cultural resources. That was probably missing our part, but I don't think it's necessary to call out the library. It elevates it above any other cultural resources in town, and we should give that to someone else to do an inventory and identify what needs protection and access. I think access to library is fairly good. There may be other things we need to look at. So I like the cultural resource, I just don't like the reference to library.
Anyone else? You have on that
That's-
commission? Have thoughts on that?
I don't have a problem leaving it in or out. I understand. It is a visible thing, and it's a big draw to the town for everybody, so I mean, it doesn't deserve, you just say that, you don't think it deserves special attention above and beyond other.
No, because as we went through this, we peeled all that stuff out.
Yep.
Because if it's that, then what else should we call out?
No, it's fair.
Okay, take it out.
Yeah, I'm okay with taking that out. Because it's specific cultural.
It's an example, and we don't do that with others.
Right.
Okay. In number 2, the action item is to create a multimodal transportation master plan incorporating pedestrian, bicycle, train, cars, and other modes of public transportation within Madison and the local region. And the following items must be considered. And in letter D, it was added, there was discussion about private developments, commercial developments, such as site plan modifications or new developments to enhance or increase our sidewalks. And that is included under the Complete Streets policy, that walkability for all. And so we thought that language of just adding as well as private development proposals, not just town investments, but also to highlight that so that in the future that can be considered in the bicycle and pedestrian master plan, as well as any future regulation changes from the commission.
Sounds good.
That makes
Is
sense.
it okay with that?
For item number 3, updating and implementing the beach and recreation facility master plan. That is an overall plan for the entire town. It was suggested to call out specifically that the surf club, given its size and vulnerability to climate change, should be addressed independently. Yep. So that was added as 2C, create a surf club master plan.
And it complements with Rockland Preserve that we've got in there too.
Right.
You okay with that? You great?
There were no changes suggested to policy B. Policy D, or excuse me, C, jumped right over it. Preserve and promote Madison's historic and cultural landmarks, both public and private. Under action item number 1, develop a long-range preservation plan for Madison. And the following items must be considered. One item that was added, develop regulations and incentives to protect historic resources. So that was, there was strong feedback from the public about the importance of protecting historic resources and buildings in the community. So that seemed like an appropriate place to add additional
That works for me.
language.
Yeah.
Do you, what was that?
There's a lot.
Yeah, there was.
Yes. I agree. Policy D had an additional revision. There was a previous language in the plan that was removed, and it was specific to septic systems and nitrogen. And that language was a little specific and not quite, it didn't quite work for the commission and it was removed, but the importance of protection of Long Island Sound resources and other inland wetland resources is important. And so that was redrafted into policy D2. And that support remediation and restoration of tidal wetlands. The following must be considered. So not only technical and financial resources about invasive species, but also focus on reducing adverse impacts such as water quality degradation from nitrogen and other nutrient loading to Long Island Sound and other significant alteration of natural ecosystem characteristics and functions. So that broadens it even more and brings us, ties us into the inland. And a lot of that is already mandated through the statutes, at least from the zoning perspective, yes.
It will become more important with climate change, I think.
Yeah, I think that was positive. We did receive several comments, not just from residents as well, who had followed along through the process, but also from the Inland Wetlands Agency. The third one was a suggestion from the Conservation Commission, and that was just the switching of a word. Instead of encouraging the use of green infrastructure and low-impact development techniques to manage stormwater, that language was firmed up to require. And that would be consistent with the state's new stormwater guidelines as well, and help set the tone for any future zoning regulations as well as stormwater management regulations. Were there any concerns about that?
Good.
Okay. And the tree preservation and protection that was encouraged by several residents who are looking to implement a tree canopy protection ordinance to add more detail to that the language that we already have. And so I drafted this language with John, thinking that it both encompassed town properties as well as private property. So it's increase active management and preservation of trees by developing management plans for town properties, including a tree replacement program, and B, providing opportunities for preservation and restoration through regulations. So that gives way to possibilities of future ordinance as the Board of Selectmen would work through that process, as well as zoning regulations or subdivision regulations.
So just a quick question on that one, on B. So then that would, under that one, then we could look at the request that was from Peggy about specifically looking at tree preservation when reviewing development plans. That's not required now, but we can start building
Right.
under that. You see that as encompassing that?
You could do that anyway.
Oh, I know.
I think there was enough language as far as preservation of natural resources.
Okay,
In this, there was a specific request from a number of residents, including the first select woman, to be a little more specific as it comes to trees themselves. And that, I don't know what that would look like now. I think that's part of this process that some of the residents are going to be going through.
Working on an ordinance.
Working
Yeah.
with the Board of Selectmen, on a local, a townwide, this could include as simple as trees within the right of way or aging trees on town properties or on the sides of the road if they need to come down. What is our policy on replacing them? What is the policy on, achieving sightlines for development? What if somebody is looking to subdivide a property or redevelop a property? You could look into options for regulations such as identifying trees over a certain DBH, things like that. Opportunities for preservation or replacement. You can really be heavy-handed or light-handed, and I think time will tell a little bit as we get a taste of what the community is really willing to entertain. And there was also language about, and this came from the Conservation Commission, and ties in really with both the regional plan of conservation and development as well as the state plan. And that's the need for supporting agricultural operations and protecting farms, providing opportunities for farms and sustainable local food supply. While, and I think one of the items that Heather had indicated was that while we may not have a significant number of farms in our community now compared to some of our neighbors, there is still an importance in highlighting that. So that's where number 6 came from: support local agricultural operations and protections of arable land to increase sustainability of local food supply. And that could be through a variety of options, whether it's tax incentives or accessory farm regulations, things like that, all ways to protect and support our farms. So policy E did not have any changes, and neither did policy F or G. So those were really the main items. And let me just look before we turn the page. I don't believe we had major changes to our implementation table as well, aside from adding action items and identifying a specific entity to lead that.
New policies.
Yep, to lead that new policy. So when it comes to the active management and preservation of trees, that lead entity was the Board of Selectmen, supported by the Conservation Commission and town staff. And support again of the agricultural operations, that lead entity was assigned to the Conservation Commission and also the Economic Development Commission as a support entity. One last item that I didn't talk about, which was in E, and I apologize. I missed it. The language, so there was question about the focus. These are FEMA properties that are located within the flood hazard area. And we had talked about this many times, and I know, John, we've talked to, John Dusa raised questions about what this means. So whether it's repeat properties that have had repeat claims for flood damage on them, opportunities to perhaps purchase those properties and remove them from future development in the flood hazard area. We just added this not to eliminate development, but essentially to reduce vulnerable development. And so I think just adding that language of reduce, I'll read it. I think it clarifies it a little bit better. Focus on property acquisition, seeking FEMA and other funds to reduce vulnerable development along the shoreline and in coastal wetland areas. But
Seems unobjectionable. That's good.
I thought that. That soothed things over.
Unobjectionable. Great, thank you, Erin.
And those are our changes. And I think overall, incorporating some of these items from the public comment has
Strengthened it.
It has
Yeah.
strengthened the action. So
We really appreciate this.
worthwhile exercise for sure.
Yeah, and thank you everyone on the commission for looking at it yet again. If everyone's comfortable with it as it is and knowing that there's still a few little grammatical or editing changes that will be made before we actually go to press. If everyone's feeling comfortable, I think we could take a vote on adopting.
Sure.
Motion?
Motion.
John, thank you. A second.
Second.
Any further discussion? John Morgan?
No, good.
Okay, great. All in favor of adopting the plan of conservation and development? Woo! Thank you so much. Yeah, that's
Thanks for
exciting.
your hard work over the last 2 years.
Lot of
It's
hard work.
exciting.
All right, next item on our agenda is 24-10. This is 6 Opening Hill Road, map 70, lot 1-1 and 1-4 14, Zone RU1, owner applicant Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation. And we are now in the deliberation phase of the public hearing process. So I thought I'd first of all, give a quick recap and overview of where we've come from and then how tonight will work. And then we can dive into the actual deliberations. So just a quick recap of meetings and the process to date. Starting back in March 7th, 2024, we had an informal discussion with the applicant, and we also received a few public comments at that meeting. May 16th was when the public hearing officially opened, and we received the applicant's initial presentation, as well as the opponent's attorney's presentation. July 16th, we held a special meeting beginning at 6 p.m. for the applicant's consultant presentation, so a little more specifics about the application. And then we opened it up for public comments. August 1st, we had a continuation of the public comments. August 15th was the opportunity for the applicant to present their rebuttal. And at that point, we closed the public hearing and agreed to deliberate at tonight's meeting, September 5th. So we have 65 days from the close of the public hearing to reach a decision, which means we don't have to rush through this. We should take the time that it needs to deliberate. And also for the record, I just wanted to ask, will any commissioner who missed any of the meetings, please verify that you have read the minutes and watched the YouTube videos of the meetings you missed? Anybody here miss anything? We were sort of the core group, yeah. I think a few other commissioners who were not here, Janet and Bob O'Connor may have missed. So if we're all good to go. Okay, great. So I just wanted to review quickly the process for deliberation. The public participation portion of the public hearing review process is closed. That means that anyone disrupting our deliberations through any kind of interruptions or shouting or booing or applause will be asked to leave. Unfortunately, we have to do that. This is the way the process works. This is our first opportunity as a commission to discuss what we've learned during the public hearing process. We don't discuss any of those outside of meetings because it's all public information. During deliberation, no new information will be presented, and the Planning and Zoning Commission reaches a decision based solely on the information provided during the public hearing process as per statutes, regulations, and land use case law. In reviewing zoning applications, the commission is acting in a limited administrative capacity to administer an existing set of legal rules to approve, modify, condition, or deny a proposed activity with our decision supported by substantial reasons. When we reach a decision after deliberations, we will have our legal counsel, who is a land use attorney, review our decision before we take a final vote on it. Erin, anything that you wanted to add to that process? That quick summary?
No.
Okay, good.
Nice job.
So I just wanted to also say our job as planning and zoning commissioners in reviewing special exception applications is to interpret laws and regulations, not hearsay, distinguish facts from misinformation, rely on data, not drama, and focus on substance, not feelings. The Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation application has what I see as the following fundamental issues, and I thought I'll read through them now, and then I thought we'd go through one by one to have discussions and kind of structure our deliberation. So the first question is the applicant a philanthropic and educational nonprofit entity? Have public health and safety concerns been addressed adequately? Are there detrimental environmental impacts on natural resources? Does the application protect historic resources as per state and local policies? Does the special exception use lower surrounding property values? And will the proposed use compromise public convenience and welfare or for future use of the land? There may be additional issues that will come up too among us. So why don't we start, if everyone's ready, to answer the question, is the applicant a philanthropic and educational nonprofit entity? Jeff?
Well, I think, aren't they by the 501c3 status that defined as that? So I would say that they are, as far as that is.
I agree with that. Anyone else want to add anything?
Can't hear it.
Yeah. You need
You
the
might have to
microphone.
pass the microphone around. for folks to speak closely to.
You have to, yeah, hold it close.
They are a 501c3 nonprofit with their purpose of being philanthropic. Sorry, it's,
I understand. I believe it was established in many discussions that they are in fact not. We divided the kind of.
Thank you.
I'm-
You're
I
okay.
don't have any issues.
Well, I like the questions you asked for the different issues, so I was thinking the same thing. So the question here is 3.4C. And the answer there is yes, because it's not philanthropic, it's not educational. What is it? So let's say this, maybe it's a 3.4C.
And if it's not, I think we're done.
Right.
I also just want to add that I think that the Emily Hall Tremaine Foundation presented what they do, especially in the rebuttal. I got more information. I felt like I was getting more information about what the foundation actually does to make me feel comfortable. Yes, it's a philanthropic nonprofit. All right, so the next question is,
Madam Chair, just.
Oh, sorry.
see if John
John,
Morgan has any.
John Morgan, sorry.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with everything.
Okay, thank you. And feel free to pipe up if I've missed you.
I will.
Oh, he will.
Great, all right. So our next question, have public health and safety concerns been addressed adequately?
Which section are you referring to for
Yeah.
that question?
This is referenced, let's see, actually, I did copy and paste. It's referenced in a couple of sections, I believe, about welfare. There's different language used at different points. And because we've heard so much, I think, from the public about safety of the road and concerns about safety, that it is really worth focusing on.
So we go to section 4.
Public convenience and welfare is listed there under 4.4B.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then under 4.4.2, all special exception permits may be granted subject to conditions and safeguards required to preserve public health, safety, convenience, welfare, and property values. So, there again. And I think, Erin, do you have regulations here just in case we need to reference them again?
Yes, so I could either pull up a PDF if you need to see it, or I can read from the document.
Pull the PDF.
John Morgan, would you like to share thoughts about public health and safety concerns and if they've been addressed?
Yeah, I did not feel that the applicant fully allied the concerns about traffic safety, quality of life issues. I think the public hearing presented some pretty compelling testimony about what the neighborhood and the potential impacts.
So as part of your deliberations, understanding that your decision needs to be based on evidence in the record. And so when you are highlighting areas that would either support an approval or denial of the application, you need to be specific and have substantial and specific evidence. So when you, in your statement, John, can you elaborate on what information you're relying on for that? Or at least cite, because the special exception and understanding in case law is that a special exception, one, these are your general criteria that you have to consider. The use is allowed in the zone subject to your consideration under these specific criteria for section 4. And you need to weigh whether or not concerns or potential impacts can be remedied through the application of a condition on an approval. So it's important as you go through this process to think of that this way. Is this something, the concerns that you raised, John, what are those? And do you think there are conditions that could satisfy that or not?
Okay, I hadn't thought of it in those terms, Aaron. So give me I'll take some time to think that through.
Yes, so that's the lens that the commission needs to be reviewing. And
Yep,
there-
understood.
there's a standard of practice for the review of an application, and this is supported through case law in the courts.
Thank you, Erin. And
Thank
John, take time with that if you need a little time.
Yep.
I wanted to say that in my analysis, I tend to think in terms of whether we got quantitative information or qualitative information and subjective or hard data. So I found that the traffic studies by the applicant were helpful. I found that, for example, the petition from the public health professionals was kind of alarming, but also kind of vague in that they made generalizations, I thought, that weren't substantiated by any hard data. And that's kind of how we have to look at it, I think, in our review is, again, I said, sort of separating fact from hearsay. So that's how I'm leading, is that I think we did get some assurance or reassurance from the traffic study and the consultant that, yes, it's a narrow road. Will this project significantly increase the dangers? I think they even said actually that the numbers of people who would be using the land through this foundation are fewer than what it would be if it were a 3-family subdivision of the 6 acres. So, but I'd like to hear what other people took away from that.
I have a slightly different perspective on it. As far as all the different subjects in the narrative subsections, the real estate, the property value, that's subjective. I'm not qualified to speak to that. It's future, but and as far as the traffic goes, I understand. I'm not necessarily refuting the information that was presented. It's just I think it's a piece of it's missing is in the part that I would look at as a potential solution or condition. And the issue that I have about this entire thing really is these larger events. I think it's 150 odd people, however many times a year that is. That's a different situation than 3 homes built in a subdivision and a family of 4.2 moving in or whatever the demographics say. This is a big event. It's episodic by definition. And I think it creates a whole different set of issues and circumstances that some of which we can't even begin to think of what could happen, how it could happen. And again, that's just my opinion on it. I'm not necessarily disputing, sight lines, people can, these are civil engineers, they can measure. I'm not saying they can't, all those stuff. And, there's issues with the trees being trimmed and all these things that have to be maintained. But just to offer that up, I think, I have a little bit less event. I have no issue with the philanthropic piece of it. I have no issue with people, living there and wanting to experience the thing at minimum. So 25-person events, that starts to push a little bit, but I think that's would be okay. It's just the big events. That's where I'm at.
Thanks.
And thank you. So Carl took a slightly different approach. I just went through section 4.4 A, B, and C to start. Try to keep
Yes.
that apart.
You read through those, Carol,
Right.
I know you read 4 point.
And 4.4B, I basically broke down, it's really 2 parts to it. The public convenience and welfare, and then the appropriate use of neighboring property. So when I looked at it, I'm gonna get to what you were saying, because I more or less agree with your statement. when I looked at the first part of it, the public convenience and welfare, I had to assume that the public represents the town of Madison and all its residents, not the residents of the neighborhood. Part B is the residents of the neighborhood. And I think at that point, I think there's a benefit to the town to having a nonprofit cited there. There'll be a slight increase in the economic benefit from that, retail sales, food and things like that, offset by the loss of taxes. The Board of Selectmen can work with the foundation to get a payment in lieu of taxes. I checked, we can impose that condition. I think also you get the renovation of the site and the continued upkeep. So I think from that aspect, the town of Madison has it's a wash, maybe a slight benefit to it, but it's not a negative part. When you go to the second part is where it gets a little different. And it really comes down to the idea in the last presentation, the applicant compared the uses that they anticipate, the meetings, gatherings, events, and residences. And residences I'll put on the side. They compared that to what would normally happen at a regular home. And you can go through each one, you can say, yeah, you could end up with a large 150-person event. It's a once in a lifetime event. Your daughter gets married in your backyard. Your son gets married in your backyard. It happens once. It doesn't happen 3 times a year every year. So to me, that is one of the conditions I started to craft is how do we work around those large events? Because then if you take the large events off the table, you take the shuttle buses off the table. So you don't need those for anything else. For the gatherings, every week, I still think that's kind of a lot. I prefer a condition that reduces the number of gatherings. It's like if your neighbor had a 30-person party every week, you'd be a little annoyed. And the meetings are just running a business. I think it's maybe allowing a meeting or multiple meetings every day of the week, every day of the year is probably too much as well. So to your point, Aaron, the idea is that in listening to everything is the applicant has the right to request locating a philanthropic organization there. But we just need to understand what their intended use are. What I saw, my read on it, their intended use goes above that. And actually, then that starts to bleed off into section 4.4C. Proposed uses are in accordance with the comprehensive plan, but let's stick with B first. If any more comments on that, and then we'll talk about those.
4.4B?
Yeah.
Well, I agree on 4.4B. So public convenience and welfare will be substantially served, the appropriate use of neighboring property will not be substantially or permanently injured. I think the most problematic part of the application is the largest events. I think that would substantially and permanently injure neighbors. The question is, where else do we allow that? Where else does that happen in town? The only thing I could think of is the farm to table types of dinners. But the material difference is where that happens, those parcels are a lot larger. One is 13-acre farm, the other is 17, 18 acres. Mercy Center came up, that's 33 acres. This is 6. And of course, the Glass House in Buchanan came up, that's 49 acres. So I think that's the most problematic part, 4.4B, the substantial permanent injury from the largest events.
John,
Working down, yes.
can you elaborate what the impact of the concern is for the population?
Mike, we can't hear you, especially if you're not facing.
Well, so
You're
the
gonna-
question is, what's the injury?
Yeah.
And the injury is noise.
Sorry?
Noise,
No.
to start.
All right, so,
I
but
mean, even if we dealt with traffic, even if everybody magically showed up without shuttle buses, right, there's the noise issue.
so we don't have any empirical data about what might be.
The question is whether or not we have any empirical data on noise.
No, the applicant didn't provide any. The applicant did include in the memo, the legal memo, right, suggested condition modeled from the Glass House, where 55 decibels is the noise limit.
Yeah.
But we don't have anything further on that to suggest that they could do that. 55 decibels is very quiet.
Yeah,
I measured it.
it's very
But
quiet.
my point is that on 6 acres, right, the noise carries. And so if it was 60 acres, it would be different, but it's not, it's only 6.
Site.
I've walked by many times, sure.
It's
It's private property, so I've never been on it,
but
but
no, I understand. I'm just wondering.
Should we pass?
You want to
Yeah,
pass the
sure.
work down to Mike?
I sympathize and agree with your concern. I have no problem. My concern though is how much will the noise permeate past the locale? Because there's a 7-foot cinder wall, there's a lot of trees, there's a lot of everything. I don't know what the net effect actually would be. It might be what people are concerned with. I don't know. But we don't know that it would be a problem. It could.
well, there's no cinder wall, so I mean, there are trees.
In the front, there's a 7-foot wall.
Yeah, but the size where it goes to Indigo Trail, right? That's where there's a little bit of a hill, then there's
Agreed,
houses.
agreed.
Well, I mean, the evidence, I think, can come both ways. I mean,
Mhm.
if there's no proof that it won't be above 55, is there any proof that it will be? That's a reasonable question. In any event, I'm just saying that's the sticking point, it seems to me. It sounds like
It is a thing.
we have a little bit of agreement on that to get started.
And just in preparation, I downloaded an app and I measured the sound level in my backyard with a light breeze going through the leaves. It was 55 decibels. It's
Interesting.
silent.
Interesting.
And then I think the
I don't
applicant
know how you do
has,
that.
has said that they would keep the buffer, trees and vegetation as it is.
But to John's point, I think it's not, am I talking loud enough? So I don't need the mic.
Yeah, I don't know, I'm holding my.
We'll find out. I would,
I'm not just talking loud enough.
I'll get it from the other room.
You're good, Bob.
I think in addition to, I think the idea of the large events does a couple of things. One, I think that's where the traffic concerns, and I have concerns about that.
Sure.
It's not just, those are narrow, windy roads and shuttle buses are shuttle buses. They're only going to be needed during that time. So you have the traffic. You do have the potential for light pollution and noise. The Porta Johns are going to be located over by the parking lot, which is closest to the, I don't know what direction that is, the property line, essentially. There's going to need to be a lot of lighting there for safety. So you're not going to have some low-lit pathway. It's got to be a lot of light. So people can get there safely. You've got light pollution, you've got the traffic, and then the noise pollution. If you have 20 people sitting outside talking, it's going to be louder than 55 decibels. And that happens. And I make a lot of noise in my backyard once in a while, and then my neighbors do, and we take turns, but it's not that frequent. And we trade off. And so I think it's just that large event. And even some of the gathering ideas, 25 people is a lot, but if they're indoors, it's no big deal. Which is those large events, I think there's an unknown there that neither party was able to represent well as to what true expectation is. We did get conflicting evidence. When I asked the president of the foundation, would the large events be mostly indoors, she said yes. Then when I don't know who it was, one of the engineers talking about the layout, he said, this is where all the porta potties are because those large events are all going to be outdoors. It's just, there's 3 or 4 different reasons, I think, why those large events can be and will be problematic.
Can I just add one comment about sound? You say 55 decibels, it'd be 55 decibels in a small area, but you really have to look at it from at a distance,
Yeah.
at some distance. So if you're 100 feet or 200 feet, whatever the distance is to the other properties, and the sound could be 80 at wherever the sound's originating, but when you get 400 feet out, it's 55.
It dissipates.
So that's something would be helpful to understand in this case.
So I'll just continue on to 4.4C because I'm on a roll.
Go for it. 4.4C is the proposed use is in accordance with the comprehensive plan.
Yes, that's it. So for all of you, the comprehensive plan doesn't exist. It's not a document. It's my reading, it is the embodiment of the zoning regulations and the zoning maps. So there is no, you can't go to somewhere in here and say, show me the comprehensive plan. doesn't really exist. It's just like an aggregate of everything the town wants to happen in development. So when you're looking, there is no place to find out what our comprehensive plan is and what it says about an application like this. It doesn't exist, so it's left to us to interpret. And then when you look at the regulations, it specifically allows philanthropic use in a residential zone. Just the way it is. That's the rule. But they don't define what philanthropic use is. So then it's up to us. It's a nonprofit, they're a philanthropic organization, there's no argument there. But when they talk about philanthropic use, what activities and what utilization was anticipated when that regulation was written? That's all we can do. And it's nowhere I could find. I looked everywhere. And so then you have to dig deeper into the regulations to try to tease out, well, what could they possibly be? It's like constitutional law. Drive you a little crazy.
There's no boundaries that I could find.
Right, but I did find something I think which helped me start to shape my thinking about this.
Okay.
And that's in section 5.1, which defines the purpose of the RU1 and RU2 districts.
Okay.
And they just talk about why those districts were created. And it's separate from special exceptions and all those things. There's a lot of words there, but the part that I grabbed was, it is intended that all uses permitted in these districts be compatible with single-family development and consistent with local street characteristics. And there's more words, and then it is hereby found and declared further that these regulations are necessary to the protection of these areas and that their protection is essential to the maintenance of a balanced community of sound residential areas of diverse types. So to me, when I read that, I said, okay, I can envision the siting of a philanthropic organization in a rural residential district as a very positive thing, right? The idea that they're going to open up shop and they're going to do the back office work there, and they're going to hold meetings to further their mission, business style meetings. The local residents can learn what the mission is and maybe get on board and try to help out, or not, doesn't matter. But overall, I think it's a positive thing. And that ends up being a definite benefit both the town and the neighborhood. And it's in alignment with the second part of 4.4B and with 4.4C. But here's the but I keep bumping up against, is that the requested uses in the original application, even with all the current conditions that have been provided, they still stand. Those uses to me far exceed what was anticipated for a nonprofit to do in a residential district. If it's in line with single-family homes, street characteristics and the like, it's not large events, it's not fairly large, 25 plus staff, so 30-person gathering every week. Even the meetings all day long, every day. Those I don't think are in alignment with what a neighborhood, what was thought of when they said we could put this in a neighborhood, it'd be a good thing. So that's where I get stuck. So 4.4A, it's a no-brainer. They are that. 4.4B, first half, I can get on board with. The second half, I think we need to rein in the level of activity, the size, and the extent of it. And I think in 4.4C, it's just not there without a significant change in the activity that is being requested. And that's when I start running into all the conditions they have to write and spend all afternoon trying to figure out how to write them. And I think we have a really big start on it. And the question is, can we create a path or potential approval and citing of a beneficial nonprofit in a residence, renovate that property, but do it in such a way that it does not have a negative impact on the neighborhood. And that's where all the conditions come.
Right, but As usual, I'm in agreement with the other engineer. But I think there's a very use-specific aspect to this. And part of that use-specific aspect of that is their general location. They are walking ponds inside the wooded area. And it makes me think I have no sense of what the impact will be for any number of people in that locale. And without some trial to see what that would be, I have no way of judging whether it would be bad or good or non-consequential. The concerns of the neighborhood are valid. They have a legitimate concern about the noise, the light pollution, and the traffic. I have no question about that. The question is, how bad will it be? I do not know the answer.
No.
John, do you want to?
Yeah, I'd like to add on to the question about the public convenience and welfare. And a lot of my concern goes to the activities being governed by this by the annual plan. That annual plan really troubles me. I think that plan puts a significant burden on the town, to the public, as far as how does that plan get policed? I cannot, in my mind, figure out a non-invasive way for that annual plan to be policed. And then how do we, on an annual basis, review that plan and figure out what's actually reasonable each year? We have another public hearing, a P&Z public hearing to hash out what the foundation can do or not do over the next year. I just don't see how that works, and I think inevitably it places a strain or a stress on the neighbors to police it themselves.
So, Madam, I mean, you can go through item by item. You know, the Attorney McKeon's information in the record does spell out specifically what the annual operation plan would require. And I also just wanted to bring your attention, and hopefully that it can help kind of understand your role in reviewing a special exception or how this special exception falls in the residential zone, both in the rural residential and the residential zone, which is section 3. And that philanthropic use, that section of the regulations is not just a philanthropic use. That use by special exception includes philanthropic, educational, recreational, or religious use, excluding correctional institutions and institutions for support of persons with mental disabilities. And so this is the same mechanism where you would put a school, a religious institution. And so when you're reviewing these, I think you need to kind of look at that. The reason these are by special exception is because that gives you the opportunity to specifically look at a particular site and particular activity of that. So that's where you have, I don't know if that helps you sort of put that in context, Bob, in understanding.
Yeah, no, it does.
It doesn't just apply to, and philanthropic, while a nonprofit is most of the time considered a philanthropic, I think you have the right to look beyond their tax status as to the missions of an organization or specifics of what that activity will be and what they'll be doing on
And
that
what it
property.
impacts in land use. Yeah. Bob, I'd like to respond a little bit to your sort of questions about the comprehensive plan and the regulations and what, what did they mean when they wrote this? And I think in a way they were kept somewhat general because times changed. And in that regard, we all know that life has changed significantly since COVID, for example. And many of us are working out of our homes much more, and that couldn't have possibly been anticipated when the regulations were written pre-pandemic. So, and to Erin's point that there's sort of expanded uses about what special exceptions are allowed, bigger and broader than what this application brings to us. And the way I've been thinking about it too is that this is an RU1 zone, which is 80,000 square feet per lot. And unfortunately, our regulations don't go by acre, they go by square feet, and they don't quite align. But I also have thought, okay, well, this is a 6-acre property. It's bigger than the standard lot size for RU1. And then I've also kind of translated that as, okay, so it goes from being a family residence to a family foundation using it. And it's still in the family, which is kind of remarkable to me. The family that lived there years ago, generations later, wants to maintain this property for family use. So I think in terms of the broad range of uses that are listed for the special exception, I don't have any problem with this being used as a family foundation on this site. Some of the uses, some of, as we've all talked about, some of the plans and the proposals, such as the large events, yeah, I think we're all uncomfortable about that. But I hope that helps a little bit in explaining
Yeah,
some
I
of
mean,
the
I
regulations.
understand what you're saying. I don't. Family history to me is not as relevant because it could be anybody that
Yeah.
tried to do this, could be any
Sure.
philanthropic organization. I think it's helpful in trying to appreciate that maybe there'll be greater care taken in renovating the place and keeping it up. So that's a positive too. But I'm not opposed to the siting of the foundation at this location. It's the conditions around which we impose to make sure that it fits within the neighborhood. It's as simple as that. I think it's a large acreage, and it's actually, there's a point here where I did go through all the points in Attorney Gibbs' submission. And there are some things there which we just need to address to make this potentially work. They have a right to ask to be there, and I think if they want to live within the spirit of what I see, because there's nothing delineated in the regulations as to what this means, then if they can live within that spirit, then I think it could be a beneficial relationship for everyone being there.
And it is, I think it's a unique application. I couldn't find anything really like it. Mercy Center is
Can you
not-
speak up, please? I can't hear.
Sorry, I don't know how much you weren't able to hear, but I was just saying that I think this is a very unique application, and it's worth asking all these questions and really delving a little bit deeper because it's not spelled out clearly. This is unusual.
Yeah, I don't, I agree. I have no issue with philanthropic use. Take these folks at their word. I think that is a benefit to the neighborhood. But I think all the different events, I think, are disruptive and not in keeping with what was there. And it's part of the other things that's, I agree with John on the policing on all the plan. I think I applaud the effort. I thought there were some good things brought out, but I just think then there's a burden put back on the community, put back on the town. I agree with all of that. And it will be challenging and things will just happen. They'll slip. They naturally will. And everyone will assume it's somebody else's responsibility and it just it'll fall back to the town and there's just more cost, more resources on top of that. So I just think it's problematic for these larger events. Everything else I think is okay. And probably would barely be noticed. For all the other reasons people pointed out, it's just these bigger things that just are troubling for me. And I think there is an issue of in addition, setting a precedent where this could happen in many other places in town. You're inviting other, non-for-profits or educations, and before you know it, every lot, every open area, we have this going on and people want to do events. I mean, it's, just as it's conceivable to say it's going to draw in a lot of money for the town with this one, it's conceivable to say a lot of people are going to be fast followers. And there's going to be a yin and a yang to all that too. And I'm not sure we're prepared for that.
I see your points. Can you imagine or consider any conditions that could be applied that would help mitigate some of these concerns?
Yes, I think those larger events should be held somewhere else.
Okay, that's one way.
Yeah,
Okay.
I'm sure there's some nuances to that, but in a nutshell, yeah,
That's what I was gonna
Yeah.
let you have the ability to look at the number of uses, the number of people, and discuss whether or not you think that should be reduced.
Right.
Reduced, eliminated, to the point where you think,
That's
this,
exactly where my head's at, is going down that path of reducing the overall impact of the neighborhood by constraining the activities that are permitted within the site,
And keep-
specific to those events.
correct.
Events, gatherings, meetings.
So as you look to this, perhaps to shave down a request, you also need to consider that you have support in the record that will support why you're doing that.
Could you hold those thoughts, actually? Because I'd like to just raise a couple other issues that I listed first. One is environmental impact, if there's any negative impact that anyone sees.
No, the only thing that came to mind was the traffic, but even
Michael.
the only thing that came to my mind was the traffic potential, but even that seems to have been mitigated by the study information we received.
Yes, but I think we all agree that that is a great area from, I'm not being eloquent about this, but it should be preserved. It's on the Neck River, there's wetlands issues and so forth. Again, it's anecdotal, but 150 people plus more trampling on that, it's not beneficial. It's simply not, just by definitions.
I just wanted to add that, and what I saw in looking at the area and putting this property in the context of the larger area, there's a lot of land properties and wetlands, obviously, and even I think some Connecticut water land. But I don't think that this will have a detrimental effect on that, but you're right about trampled grass on the lawn.
It is what it is.
But that's their lawn.
Then I also wanted to, unless anyone has any other serious concerns about environmental impacts, John Morgan? Nope, okay, Jeff,
I don't.
anybody
Just to
else?
back up your point, right? The applicant could have made more of an argument for the environmental preservation because 3 acre, three houses, you can see what that would look like just by walking up the road. So there is a benefit to keeping it intact as much as possible.
It is one of their 3 pillars of areas of concern too. As is the next question about protecting the historic resources. You've touched on it a little bit, Andy, about, you see that as a good thing that they will. Bob, you've talked about it too a little bit, that, maybe by having it be the family, they will care more. I don't have any concerns about what they've presented to us about preserving the historic structures and not having.
But again, it's simply there, if this goes through, they'll renovate the house.
Yeah.
They'll bring it back to its original form, which it's historic, and that's one of the things we've been trying to do.
And there's value.
Yes. Open
Okay, and then-
space, that's all good.
The next question for everyone is about property values, which is another tough one because there's no close comparison, but to pass them like if I could.
Well, regarding property values, I think it depends on what exactly goes on. So it sounds like we're all moving in the direction of what will the conditions be. So the conditions will determine the impact on the property owners and the impact potentially on value.
What John said. I mean, I don't want to just keep talking, but I don't think there's any evidence given that property values will go down or go up or stay the same. There was testimony given by the applicant, but I still think that testimony was flawed. And so it's an unknown.
It was a difficult comparison.
It's a difficult comparison. And I think by allowing the right activities to occur, we can have minimal, if any, impact on property.
Thanks. John Morgan, did you want to add anything?
No, not on that topic.
Then I think we've addressed public convenience and welfare, sort of wrapping it all together with public safety. But if anyone has anything else to add, of course, please do. And I wanted to just include the future use of the land because I don't see this proposed activity as having any negative impact on future land use. At any time, they could sell it, it could be subdivided. Anyone else here? Pass the microphone down.
I don't see any impact in that regard. I think restoring the buildings would be beneficial.
John Morgan, anything else to add?
No.
And are there any other issues anyone else has concerns about that I haven't listed here? If not, maybe we could talk about then, what direction we think we should take. We've already heard from most of us, I think, saying the big events are a concern. And I think we've all taken a close read through of the proposed conditions that Attorney McKeon did submit as an appendix. So that's a good starting point, I would say.
That was just my takeaway from your discussion. Looks like you're moving in a direction of an approval with conditions. And so if you're looking, if that is correct and you've determined that's the consensus of the commission, then you start looking into the specific uses in here where you're comfortable, where you feel conditions should be added, where your concerns are, whether something should be eliminated, and we start going through that. And then it might make sense just to follow along in that document, the Exhibit A from Attorney McKeon, because that it does kind of summarize up all of the changes that have occurred through the application in response to comments. And so that's an accurate request, for the applicant, and then you can start to see where there are, whether it's timing or number of event, things like that, that we can start
Erin,
picking away with.
Could you pull that down?
I can pull that up.
And I also want to say that I do appreciate what the applicant has done from the preliminary application and, making concessions and hearing, I think, listening to a lot of you and making some changes, but we also want to make sure that what we're agreeing on is the revised application, not the original application that's on file. And that's where it becomes even more important, I think, to get the conditions in good alignment that we all feel. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's where it will be helpful. If the more information you can give to me, I can start to put that in a draft for you for your next meeting. And again, as you indicated, Carol, to have the town council
Yeah,
take a look at that as well.
sure, we're good.
I'm sorry. So I'm just gonna scroll, not to give everybody a headache. I'm sorry, but it opened at page 1, but I'm gonna try and,
Page 10.
This is page 10.
right, but I have so many things here, I can't change my page, so I have to scroll, I'm sorry. I have too many Zoom windows
We can look away.
that are blocking my page section.
Stop.
There we go.
Here we go. So I don't know if everybody has a paper and wants to read, or if you prefer that I read areas. I'm happy to.
I printed out a hard copy, but Aaron, I started with section C, which are the general conditions of the special exception. I don't know if we need, I can't see it unfortunately to see what's A and B of Exhibit A.
You have to start here.
Oh,
You have to start here.
well, exhibit, these are the uses.
Okay,
Right,
then yeah, we should start with those.
okay. So the uses are itemized, as you had known and discussed, the administrative office, the meetings, the gatherings, the residencies, and the events. Okay? The first proposal is the administrative offices, which is not to exceed 1,500 square feet. And currently, the staff of the foundation are 2 full-time and 2 part-time employees. Essentially, they'll have time in the office approximately 1 day per week. Any concerns on that one? Okay.
No, that works fine.
Okay. Then the second is the meetings, and these are the indoor,
Aaron,
yes.
Before you start, do we have to read the whole section? Does everyone have access to the document?
We don't have to, if you're comfortable with
I want to ask everyone else. I'm comfortable. I've been
I'm
reading it
comfortable.
forever.
That's
you're
fine.
comfortable with the meetings?
No, I want to make changes to it, but
Oh, you want to read?
I'm comfortable with the context of what's in there. I know what's in the meeting section. I'd just like to jump, if y'all are comfortable, we could jump to discussing any conditions on it.
Right.
As opposed to
Okay.
reading through
Oh,
all.
instead of saying out loud what they're proposing.
Yeah.
Okay, as long as everybody's, yeah.
Because what they're proposing here is not the proposal, because this proposal is modified by the SYKSLK. SLR. The SLR recommendations modified this.
There are additional conditions that the applicant
Yes. So if we have.
notes in them. So-
Y'all okay with that?
Yeah.
Okay, just wanted to check.
We don't need to read it all, but if you have issues
Yeah.
with any of
I'm
it.
happy.
So on meetings, are there any?
That's what you're at. That's what he's asking.
Okay, so,
Be slow.
okay, so for the meetings, there are some items in here which are modified by the SLR, which is the service kitchen needs to be a residential kitchen. It could be high-end, doesn't really matter, but it's not a commercial kitchen. Stove, couple ovens, microwave, stuff like that. So it's not commercial, so that's part of it. But to me, I'm just gonna jump into it. I think allowing meetings every day, as many meetings as you want every day of the year is too much. And so I'm looking as a condition to limit how many meetings are allowed first. And second, in the body of this, it does talk to on-site parking with overflow parking. I would say no, only on-site parking, no shuttle buses. Can't fit everyone there, they can park. But no shuttle buses. That addresses the traffic. Because both people shouldn't need a shuttle bus.
Just, this has been so many changes, but does the shuttle bus, what about those 12 or 13 other parking spaces that we created?
That's on the site plan.
The site,
Yeah, that's,
so that's fine.
right, so there should be plenty of
Should be
space.
plenty of space.
So
Yeah.
you're saying that you can't even bring the shuttle buses onto the.
I don't think we should allow shuttle buses at all as a means of transportation and transporting people back and forth.
Based on just you think that additional traffic.
I think it cuts down on the traffic, or it cuts down on the number of
No,
cars.
they're gonna, everyone's gonna park there until you have too many people, and then they're gonna have 2 or 3 people who can't park there. Park someplace in Madison where we don't have the parking anyway. And then shuttle them over. I don't think it's necessary. It also adds to the constraint on the size of the meetings. If you have, because this is where it gets the heart of it, if you have 8 residencies, 12 people in a meeting, plus 3 staff. Every day you've got 25 people on site, 23 people on site. So I'm trying to find a way to just constrain, control how property is utilized.
Transportation is tough, people show up and move it.
I'm-
I'm not sure that's the way to constrain. I mean, we can just say,
Okay.
hey, maximum occupancy or the event is 25 or 50, whatever that number is. to determine
I'm throwing out what I
how
think,
people
yeah.
arrive at the property is like a stretch.
Okay.
I mean, Bob, when I go through the calendar that they gave us,
That's what they gave us as a presumptive first year. It's not what they are asking for.
okay, but just, if I may finish, to say that it's not the high density you're talking about at all, of having 25 people there every day. I don't see that happening.
That's what they're asking for. Their request is to have unlimited meetings of 12, no, this is the meetings, of 12 people or less. Unlimited meetings throughout the year. There's no constraint on that.
Excuse me?
Hello, speak up.
That's 55 decibels.
Put the mic near your mouth.
On the microphone is 55 decibels. Isn't that already accommodated pretty much by the?
Still can't hear you.
It's 57.
So is the
He's
mic
asking-
working or not?
I'll repeat it. He's asking if that's not accommodated
Pero,
by the parking.
By the gravel.
Right, and it is, so if we were to say, look, for meetings, all meetings would require on-site parking, we're done. That's fine, I'm fine with that.
Okay.
That's the intention. In the heart of this, though, it allows for overflow parking and shuttles, it says it. All parking for meetings shall be on site with overflow parking if any stage off-site and serviced by a temporary shuttle operation with vehicles that have capacity carried over than 20 persons, which is modified by the traffic engineer to be a length vehicle, not a volume. So just eliminate that part. Meetings, on-site parking only, and we're good to go.
I agree with that. That's why I was asking about those other spaces. They should have some.
But let me just clarify, if I might,
Sure.
are you saying that a shuttle can't park on site? Shuttle bus, like a kind of minivan? It's also not, we're not defining shuttles yet, so maybe we need to clarify that.
That is the way it could be interpreted, it's not how it's written. It's written here, so there are two different things, on-site parking and shuttle overflow. So the way it's written, they separate it. If we want, we can do it however we want. And if we want to have
But keep it simple by saying on site.
on-site parking, I think it's the simplest way to do it.
Do you have more? I think you have more to say.
Well, the other thing too is just limiting putting some kind of limit on the number of meetings which can occur at the facility. I don't really know where to start. I'm trying to envision this, but as it's written, it's unlimited. I don't like unlimited.
The calendar that they gave us, it is limited. I mean, so we could.
It may be affected by tomorrow.
Mike's gonna need the microphone when he
I'll get
speaks,
going.
because you're not facing you're just a little softer.
I think they made an attempt to bound it. That's what that calendar of events was.
I agree, they did. They made an attempt to show what it could be, but they're still asking for unlimited.
Then we could make this the condition.
That's fine. It's just not unlimited. Something between none and unlimited is a good place to be.
All right.
But that's what I'm saying, right? The calendar is great. It gives you an indication of what they're thinking for that first year, but it's not what they're asking for.
Okay. That's a valid point.
We're approving unlimited if we just go with what's written.
I think so I don't see it as unlimited number of meetings. I see it as an open calendar that they can have a meeting on any of those days. It's how I
How we
read that.
want to, we can structure it, I think, however we want, so long as there's some control in place.
That's valid.
And this is the least impactful thing they're going to do. Having people come to the house and have a meeting is not a big deal.
We all know it.
It's just that it's every day. potential.
Potential every day, but
So
not
let's just
according to
control
this
that.
sample.
I don't care about that sample because it's just an example of what might happen the first year, not what might happen 20 years from now.
Okay, so Bob, what if we use this calendar
Yeah,
as a condition?
I'm going down that path with you.
Okay.
We can look at that as a way of trying to,
Because I can't anticipate what might happen in 20 years, and I don't want to.
that's why I wanted
That's,
to
you know,
change.
based on nothing. Really. So, but the calendar they gave us to look at, to study, and it's a much lower impact use, I would say.
How do we
So-
condition the condition? I go, with that, I understand that, trying to reach some sort of acceptable ground here, but I agree with John Morgan's point before, again, how do we police all this?
Yeah.
Do we have to put something in there that says, okay, every year, someone has to come before whomever with another plan, and it has to be approved, and they have to stick to it, and someone has to make sure that they do stick to it.
So there is a
That's the
condition
operational
Yep.
plan.
at the
Yeah.
very end.
Very
It says the commission through the zoning enforcement officer.
Yep.
Reserves the right to conduct periodic reviews both on and off site to determine compliance with the terms and conditions of this approval and to amend or revoke said approval upon written notice should any violations of such terms and conditions so warrant. That's probably the most important condition.
Yeah, and it's as long as the zoning enforcement officer is
And it's done,
set up to be able to.
as I
do this.
understand, it's done for some farm activities and
Currently,
so there are.
we
there's
require
multiple-
annual reporting for several
So there's a precedent.
types of
Okay,
uses.
that's fine. I wasn't sure. I knew it was mentioned.
John, I heard you chime, did you have?
Yeah, I guess I just have that same concern. I mean, is the zoning enforcement officer going to spend a week outside of the foundation checking who's coming in and out? Is that the audit? I mean, I just don't understand how that policing works.
You know, some of these conditions and several that are required from land use agencies are self-reporting. And often zoning complaints, are complaint driven. Violations are complaint driven a lot of times. That's true. As are inland wetland violations, when something goes, astray. There are, it's similar with an affordable housing development. There are requirements for annual reporting from an administrator that goes to the zoning enforcement officer. The zoning enforcement officer is your agent, full-time staff that enforces the zoning regulations. That is their job. And so that is receiving these annual reports. We require annual affidavits for accessory apartments that need to be collected. We require, as Carol and Mike said, for farm stays as well. So this is similar in this proposal, and I think that's what Attorney McKeon had indicated on the record was that he was the applicant who drafted that farm stay regulation and used that spirit, that annual plan to be able to provide the commission with the scope of what that activity is going to be for the year. And you have the opportunity to review that on an annual basis and review it, as well as if, and there's a requirement to report any complaints or non-compliance issues. We can go through that, the specifics of that. I don't know if you want to jump around or if you want to go by use in this. I didn't quite follow where you're going with the calendar and the number of meetings. Are you using the number of meetings that are shown in this annual calendar from, it was Michelle Knappich who went through that. You want to count up the number of meetings that were in there and that's the total per year? I'm just trying to figure out how you're looking to draft this.
We can do that. I was thinking of just using this as the condition you know, that this calendar be followed unless people have problems.
So it's, to me,
Well, that's the annual
John
operational
has it,
plan.
yeah, I'm looking at it, it's for the number of meetings, it's actually, I think, probably too restrictive to allow them to conduct their foundation. Because they have meetings in all of January. It's probably not adequate. That might be good.
It's not
for
up
the
to us to decide.
I know, but
what I see when I read the meetings part is, one, there's every day of the week and the hours of operation, if it's a Sunday or whatever that. So there's conditions of the meeting, whether they serve food or not. What you're talking about is, and the number of participants, and then the adding is number of meetings allowed in a year. Not when they're scheduled, just the number of years. That will be reasonable. What you're thinking is, when you read that, it implies that you can have a meeting every single day of the year, which is
But that,
not
that needs to be
likely.
addressed.
yeah, multiple meetings a day, every day.
Okay.
Right, that's what it says.
Well, I think it really just says that they can have a meeting any day of the year during those time frames that they specify.
And not that they would.
Not
No,
that,
not that they will, I doubt it.
But they can't.
But they can't.
Say it.
right, is there a concern about what days the meeting? You know, I would look, if you want to look at a number, then maybe that's something that we add as a condition of that and just reframe that meeting, you know, how that's
Yeah.
worded,
Yeah.
that's all.
So the annual operating plan, and as you read through item 5, section B is the annual operating plan. I'm just going to come forward for this so you can see, and that might help. Okay, so the plan includes all of the uses on the property. And so when you look at number 5 of what the plan shall include, goes through who's owner and operator, the date, any previous violations, the statement of compliance, and then 6, it's the annual operation plan. Materials, hold on one second. Number 4, I apologize. Oh, I did pass it. I knew I had it here for you. So the applicant is required to, in the plan, to identify when the meetings, the gatherings will be included.
Annually.
Well, actually, it doesn't. It starts at gatherings. So you could request in the annual operating plan to have meeting dates identified and called out, included in that plan, instead of just gatherings, events, and additional, and when the residencies are. That gives you an opportunity to have that up front ahead. You still probably, in the special exception, as I'm kind of thinking this through, the condition, you're gonna want, you can include it in the operating plan, but if you want to cap the number, there should be some language as a condition as well.
I think the practical aspect is that you cannot ask them to tell you the schedule of their meetings for the year. Because meetings are ad hoc. Someone calls and says, I want to give a lot of money, I'd like to talk to you about it. You need to schedule a meeting. You're not going to know that gatherings are planned, the events are planned, but meetings now, it could be 3 meetings a week.
Or you Zoom.
You can do that.
Well, what if it's just like less than 5 people?
Yeah, we can go down that route. Come up with a different
Not to
definition of
exceed.
meetings.
Not to exceed, right?
Well, and remember that your conditions need to reflect the reasoning for this, that this be supported in your record to be You know, so you limiting something, you need to identify the reasons why and how that's supported in your record.
I think it makes sense.
I mean, you can come back.
Those are the details.
You just have to start right.
I think you have to start, somebody has to start drafting.
Well, I think,
I think it comes back to your point. I think it comes back to putting a governor on the number of meetings that can occur. So if it comes down to simply saying that meetings as defined of 12 people or less are fine, parking should be on site, no shuttle buses, parking's on site, meetings of 12 people or less, no more than 2 meetings a day, 3 days a week, something like that. Or 1 meeting a day, because you can't handcuff them to the point where they can't run the foundation, they're just gonna walk away. And maybe we could do that, make it so bad that they can't do it, but there's no reason to do it that way. That just falls apart. But if we're trying to just ensure that there's not 5 meetings every day with a constant flow of cars because they're 20-minute meetings, that's one thing we can do. It addresses the traffic issue and the noise issue and all that other stuff.
So they could abuse it in another way.
All those people coming in using the bathroom, it's gonna blow out the septic system. So there's a reason to put down, let's just do, and I don't know what those numbers are, but
And are you thinking weekly, monthly?
I think it's a weekly thing, let them run their, I know it's not a business, let them run their business. But then decide how to do it, but let's do it in a low impact way.
Weekly.
Yeah, this is number of meetings on a weekly basis and a maximum number of meetings on a day. No more than 12. Fine donut, fine donut. Does that make sense?
I'm not sure the number of meetings on the day
Okay.
makes sense.
Yeah, the intent is to limit the traffic and noise and everything.
Mike, you're gonna need the microphone.
And I think the idea is to limit the number of people who know. Or it makes sense to do something.
Because one of the presentations was about the ins and outs of a single family home, which is much harder than I ever imagined. But if you've got 2 or 3 meetings going on every day, 12 people, that's 36, 72 total ins and outs.
Yeah.
That's a lot.
So-
That's it. That's what I'm trying to mitigate.
All right, so the conditions, we should put some boundary.
Yeah.
We have to define. Okay.
But this was the easy.
Seriously.
Well, it can be, because I think you're saying we limit it to whatever the number is, 2 meetings a day, not to exceed the available parking. End of story.
That's a good way to put it.
That's it, no shuttles, none of the other stuff, that's it, so you don't have the potential for, these 20-minute turnaround,
Yeah.
speed dating type of meetings.
We can get it really simple, because I am very concerned about the whole monitoring of this. How we do it, but that's a different question. It's not, I'm sorry about that. You have enough information to put a template together for us?
What is the suggestion? What is the suggestion for number of meetings per week?
I was gonna say per day, because I don't necessarily think we should limit it per week, I understand, maybe that's it, I would say, no more than 2 a day. At the max.
2 meetings, not to exceed
Not to
12
exceed, not to
people
exceed the available parking spots
per day.
per day.
We'll start with that.
That's good.
John Morgan, do you have feedback on that?
What do we need to then just decide what what kind of meetings these are? Are these? I mean,
The
this
meetings
is.
are defined here,
So, Aaron,
page 10.
Or by defining the size, not to exceed size, that they can do whatever kind of meeting they want, not to exceed 12 people.
Aaron, if this was a person running a business out of their home, what would be their restrictions?
We don't regulate the number of meetings for a home occupation.
Or book clubs or any kind of gatherings.
Daycare.
A home occupation limits the square footage in the home and the number of employees. It does not limit the number of appointments or
And-
meetings.
You know, and the sample, again, going back to the sample calendar, there are very few days when there are staff on site.
And Carol, I get that, but the way that was presented, my understanding was that was kind of a made up, this is what we could possibly do.
This is what it could look like, but again, to give us I think, a sense of the intensity of the use.
I believe this was the past year's calendar for the,
Is it based on last year's calendar?
yes, that was
So based
my
on their
understanding
experience
from that
operating the
presentation.
foundation, it sounds like. So their experience with how they operate the foundation.
I keep going back to it just because I felt much more comfortable about the use of the property with this information. Except for the big gatherings. we're all concerned about. But, you know, looking at what they're talking about and how many meetings and how many people will be there, I just didn't see nothing screamed problem to me. It's very low impact.
Are you suggesting that we adopt that schedule?
I was trying to get
I
that
get it.
as a condition or some, you know, I don't know how we say it, you know, I don't really want to get into micromanaging their days for them, or even their weeks necessarily.
But if we don't, then they'll set the criteria for what happens if it's out of our control, and it'll happen every
Well,
year.
they have to propose, they have to give this kind of calendar every year for approval,
Right.
before they can do anything.
I understand, I think we better, we set the initial
Some
conditions
boundaries.
and boundaries that we feel comfortable with, and then they're obliged to work through those. Otherwise, this is gonna come up for debate every year. So we didn't have any problems last year, let's, let's expand it a little bit, one or two more meetings and so forth, It'll happen. It's gonna be-
So, right, so a meeting is the only thing that's not defined by number of them in this
Correct.
proposal. Everything else does have a cap.
But we don't have to agree with that.
You have the opportunity to, yes,
Yeah.
we just didn't get to those.
Yeah, I know. That's what I'm about to say. I thought this one would be easier.
So did I.
Well, this is the easiest one.
Yeah.
As Aaron points out, we have to have a rationale though for the limitation. So if there were 3 houses there, meetings of 12 people, 3 houses would happen off and on, a lot of people over.
Plus their
They come and
families.
go, right? So what's the rationale for?
Right, we wouldn't restrict the number of cars they
I
have,
think it's the traffic.
the number of people living in the house.
But you're right, even with 3 families, with 4 teenagers, with licenses,
But
there's a lot of coming and
there's
going.
no one's presented that you put 3 homes on that lot. You've got
Right,
the
maybe
river,
we
you've got
shouldn't use
wetlands.
that.
You probably get 2 homes. So that should probably be our bogey. It's not gonna change the
But we
map.
can even say 1. Because it's 1 house now.
But you could use that as an example,
Yeah, I think,
just from experience in housing in general. Not that that lot has 3 houses.
I'm sorry, I can't take this much longer. Nobody is addressing the handicap.
Excuse me.
you
I'm sorry.
Well, I'm getting a little tired of some of the rhetoric here.
Well, this is our job. This is what we have
It's
to
your
do.
job to address
You're welcome
everything.
to leave.
It's your job to address everything, including the
Doing our
handicap.
best, sir.
We'll call ADA, we'll see what they.
This is deliberations. It is not public hearing. If you'd like to be at a public meeting, you may sit quietly and allow the commission to deliberate. This is not a back and forth with the audience.
I'm not looking for a back and
Everyone
forth.
has had their opportunity. There's no speaking from the audience.
I'm not
Madam
looking
Chair
for an
made that
argument.
very
I want
clear.
it to be fully discussed. and take advantage, make sure you talk about the handicap.
You are not defining how this meeting is being run. You may listen.
No, that's.
Please sit down and allow the commission to do their work.
I can stand because I have a cramp in my leg.
All right, so are we making progress on the condition about meetings,
Yes.
types of meetings? Should we go on to the gatherings of up to 20 people? Aaron, you have some notes about the meetings? We've kind of flipped and flopped back and forth about.
I got that.
About the calendar, which I do feel that that was a good model to use versus day-to-day, not to exceed, but I think we can even combine them in a way. You know, this is the model we were presented based on their past, I think it was the past year activities. This to me was acceptable, or I felt pretty comfortable with it, except for a few of the big gatherings. And but within that, if we want to add additional language to be a little bit more concise or restrictive, maybe that's how we should be thinking. I mean, maybe I'm thinking of a hybrid kind of setup with the calendar, but then if we want to say all on-site parking, without clarifying whether it's a minibus or a carpool or anything like that, just say on-site parking, not to exceed 12 people, not to exceed 2 times a day. Does that work?
I'm happy to put some language together that you can then start
That would be
as
great.
a starting
Comment,
point.
Yeah.
So that way you
Control
can
F.
get,
We need something written down so we can then look.
Yeah, we don't
Agree
have
to
a
disagree on
whiteboard.
that.
okay.
Or we could use that as a blackboard.
Okay, so the next are the gatherings. And those are
Gatherings.
more than 12 people and
to
maximum of
25.
25, not including the staff, the programming staff. So that's attendees.
How many times roughly? Is that-
No more than 4 per month.
Four. Once a week.
But we're not gonna limit it if they want to have 2 or 3 or 4 in a week.
It's not to exceed.
I'm barely there at one.
Yeah.
So it says no more than 4
Per
in a
month.
calendar month. Is what it says.
That's one.
That's 1 week.
Well, it could be 4 in a row, but just mathematics. Must be a special purpose for these meetings, I guess. It's not a calendar.
Andy, you're gonna have to use the mic.
Okay,
You're
I'm
not
just saying,
gonna
I
have
just wanted to-
in the other
it doesn't
room
matter.
here
It doesn't matter.
or online.
Just curiosity.
So philanthropic and educational gatherings are the same content as meetings, just bigger.
It further states they're mission-based gatherings for the foundation that will be supported through philanthropic dollars and non-revenue generating.
So the question is, how many would we be comfortable with approving them to have in a month? They've asked for 4. My take is 1 every week is a lot.
I don't have a problem with it. It's the way they've supposed.
Yeah, I don't use it.
Andy, you gotta speak up.
I think 1 a week's too much. Because a lot of people are, because it's actually more like 35 people on site. You have staff and other folks as well that are already there. I think it's going to exceed the parking and it's going to require the shuttle.
These do include the shuttle.
Yeah, I know. So that's an issue.
Any event, any gathering with a shuttle, the
Yeah.
use of shuttle, the number per,
Yeah, no,
Not
it's really
following.
more of it's, I just have to picture of this big shuttle showing up. The one you described, the size of it was not a minivan. That's a good-sized shuttle.
And then school buses go up and down the road.
I understand that.
And even if the shuttle was on property.
That's more than concern. School buses and people. These things can happen during the middle of the day too. You got a lot more traffic on the road. Oversized vehicles already. Not to mention all the Amazon trucks and UPS trucks and everybody else.
Landscaping.
Yeah.
We mentioned those guys. Speaking of noise.
They're taking over, they're taking everywhere, they're everywhere. So I mean, it adds to it. It's just something, this is additive.
So there's not enough parking on site
Yes,
for a gathering without a shuttle bus.
Yes.
that's why I thought this would be the hardest one. Tackle.
There's a turn, right?
Yes.
Shuttle bus.
The fire department wanted a turnaround.
It's in the middle,
the
it's the
end.
main gravel driveway that's there now. And they're gonna make some accommodation to knock out something so they can swing around. But they don't have to get a truck in there. That's what it is.
The second driveway with the overflow parking, that's the turnaround you were referring
Right,
to.
okay,
The
okay.
fire department required a
Yeah,
turnaround
yeah.
at the end of that parking area.
The new part, not the one.
Not knowing, no, actually,
So you
Right,
would-
that is a,
You would be opposed to have them using that.
just don't like it. Being honest.
I wouldn't have a problem.
I wouldn't either.
John, do you have any feedback on the shuttle?
You know, I just come, the fact that we have to get into the micromanaging of this, it to me is that there's something wrong with this application. I just don't, this does not feel right.
You guys do not.
You guys are gonna have to leave. You can't do that.
Sorry.
You can't do it.
I mean, you can always go home and listen on Zoom. I know you don't want to do that, but that's an option.
Well, it's also an option if the meeting continues to be disruptive, that you adjourn and hold only a Zoom meeting so you can properly deliberate without
Peacefully.
being interrupted.
Go ahead, John.
We're challenging the foundation by limiting how they run their business day to day. By limiting the number of meetings. And if we could find a way to limit the cars coming in to parking on site for all of these gatherings, I mean, it seems like it needs to be something that's manageable. That's policeable.
And John, you're right, when it gets this hard to try to figure out how to get it done, we're just looking at it the wrong way. Because we're just getting down to micromanaging. It's gonna have a meeting on Tuesday and Wednesday, but not Thursday. It's
We're not
gotta
doing
be a
that.
simpler.
Yeah, we're not doing it.
We're not doing that. We have models that we're working with and the structure that they have proposed, which is an annual review, if we don't want to do it, we can turn it down, but we have to say why.
The issue is just sizes. What we're talking about is sizes.
Yes. And the vehicular accommodations that come with it, or issues that come.
Is it just vehicular, or are you worried about noise?
Noise.
So, let me put perspective on the noise factor.
Use the microphone.
You and I need to do our homework on the indoor square law.
No, it doesn't. I don't even want to get into that detail. I mean, to me, the goal is simple, right? Allow this organization to exist within the neighborhood and not disturb the neighborhood. I think that's the win-win. The question is how. So multiple meetings a day disturbs the neighborhood, noise, traffic. The gatherings are different. How do you manage that? But I think what John was getting to is just put a limit on how many, okay, there's some way we can just control how many people can come. But even then, it's just,
I don't think it's a simple equation.
no,
No, because no one's gonna be standing there with a cow.
that's just it.
I think you need to go back through the process of this application and look at the material that has been submitted to you and the concerns that were raised. And so some of these changes that you're reading in here are in response to concerns that have been raised by both you and the public. And when you look at traffic as a concern, the use of a shuttle vehicle to reduce the number of vehicles into the property was proposed to address that. So your options are to have smaller numbers and multiple vehicles coming in versus one vehicle that can hold more people. So that was, I think, where the use of a shuttle came from.
As well as the fact that I think some of the attendees will not have cars. You know, my impression is that they're staying at the Madison Beach Hotel or somewhere. They're not gonna have vehicles. I mean, yeah, they can do Uber or our extra mile program.
You don't, right, I don't know where
That increases.
there was some testimony from Michelle Knapp as
Yeah.
far as national, being a national
Right.
organization and bringing people in for specific
Well, and looking at this,
seminars or
Calendar.
retreat,
Yep.
things of that nature, certain artists, that type of a thing. So we don't know if they're local or if they're traveling from.
Right.
But
having a shuttle option from the hotel and downtown, I think they've also recommended from the Route 79 parking area. You know, it's a kind of carpooling really, but that's why I don't know exactly what size the shuttle is. We've heard concerns about a huge bus not being okay. But, there are smaller shuttles, even the Madison Beach Hotel shuttle goes back and forth to the train station all the time to pick people up. And it's like a big van, so.
And that, I mean, you can look through what information you have submitted regarding traffic.
Yeah.
From the applicant side, there is a traffic report as well as an addendum that came in after that. And then you have various testimony as well from residents. There was, Attorney Pellegrino had some general diagrams regarding turning radius.
Yep.
And then I think there were Dave Sullivan's comments after
Yep.
as well.
Yep.
And perhaps, I mean, I can bring that out, or
Yeah,
if you
yeah.
have questions on certain sizes or that revised recommendation of shuttle, Bob, how you mentioned, should be based on length and not
Yeah.
the volume of people that it.
Yeah, but to your point, Andy, I think you and I are probably stuck in the same spot when they talk about the shuttle. It's a big shuttle, it's kind of like, the airport. It is,
It's like
renting car
24
place.
It's a 24 passenger.
But we're anchored in that large shuttle because that's what they need. That is what is needed for events. A lot of people, you need a lot of people in each front. The gathering is much smaller. More than half the people who park on site, maybe the answer is, great. It is a good idea to allow someone, because you're gonna have the carpool, you can't all park there. Get a smaller shuttle, the foundation can own. It's an extended van or something, it holds 10 people. It's just like driving a van, minivan. Maybe that's the answer, where you take out that large vehicle, which is problematic on the bridge, problematic on the turns, and just allow them to bring people that way.
I think that's just getting into the weeds too much.
Well, it's no different than saying 20 is okay. A 20-person shuttle versus 10-person.
As long as you understand, so they have autonomous
I disagree.
The
That's what I'm
applicant isn't proposing a number, they had the 20, but as you indicated, that's been superseded by a vehicle of a
Right, so then we
specific
come up with a
length,
smaller length.
not occupancy in
Right.
there. So if you start limiting the number,
Then you just come up with a smaller, whatever the length is, find out what the length of the appropriate size van would be and say that's the. I get it. I understand what you're saying.
Or you limit it to non-commercial weight vehicle, which is under 12,500.
Yeah. Something like that.
Including contents and occupancy.
It's a way to control it.
I just don't think that's how solutions work. So instead of using 24 passenger vehicle once, you use a 10 passenger vehicle.
No, you have to limit the trips.
Oh, so now we're gonna add another constraint.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
That's-
That's why I don't like it to begin with.
I
So,
know.
yeah,
Well, are you saying we shouldn't allow it at all? I mean, so where's the line? I mean, if we're gonna make it so impossible they can't do it at all, what you're saying is we're gonna cross that off.
again, opinion.
Okay, but I think also we need a rationale for any limitation, right? So I mean, if the big UPS truck can come down, the big Amazon van can come in, or if, I can have 10 people or 15 people picked up at my house to go to the airport, what's the limitation? Why would it apply here?
I understand, I just think it's creating more traffic, more issues.
So the idea of the ban was to mitigate the number, amount of traffic.
Right.
And the flip side of the concern is the number of people at the event.
Right.
So to me, I would think the length of vehicle would be appropriate and it's not,
It's immaterial.
I mean, I'm trying to restrict
You
it
guys
to
aren't
just
saying
a
the same
van.
thing.
I'm sorry?
You guys aren't saying the same thing.
I'm just saying that-
Intended to, but you're not.
I don't know.
I'm not sure I understand you.
I'm just saying that I don't think that we can kind of restrict the occupancy. I mean, I think length maybe makes sense. I mean, what size, what weight can go over the bridge, for example?
More than
we don't have that information in the
Yeah.
record.
No, we don't.
Yeah, you're gonna have to look through,
School buses go over the bridge.
yeah.
Yeah, so-
Bridgeway is probably not an issue. There's moving vans that go over there, so I'm sure there's not.
Good point.
Opening Hill Road is a collector road
Mhm.
in town.
Should we pause and try gatherings
Yeah. I think
No,
that's a good
yes.
idea.
and maybe start with the biggest
Yeah,
ones?
go to, I was just thinking the exact same.
Go that way.
Tackle back, because I might trickle down.
And see how
Because
we all
yes, I have a thought. Yes,
land
agreed.
for the bigger gatherings.
Yes,
We all have
Events.
concerns about those.
let's go there.
The events, yes.
The big events. Thank you, Erin. So we're talking up to 150 people. Allow it all once a year,
What I-
times a year.
What I would propose is in this one, what I might propose is for this initial year, allow them to do one and monitor the one, get data. We don't have no empirical data on what that really means or doesn't mean. It could be a terrible thing like many people believe. It may not be anywhere near as bad, but we don't know. I think having one in 1 year will give us the information we know to see if we can improve it any further.
I agree with that. As a trial.
Well, I'll go back to what I said before. I mean, there's nowhere else that I can think of on a similarly sized parcel where we allow that and where it's done. Right, so that's the empirical evidence you're looking for. And it
There's
doesn't
no
exist.
precedent.
No, well,
I don't know if that means anything good or bad.
well, it just means there's no precedent.
Do you mean, John, for commercial uses or even just in a residential zone?
People have parties that are that big.
The zoning regulations, that was the one point I did want to tell, is that we do not regulate a special event on private residential property. The only thing from a permitting standpoint is if there is a tent and any regulations through the building code or fire marshal.
Right.
And police, I think, right?
And a special event, there may
I
be
thought there was, but
police department approving that.
at a certain
That-
number, you might have to have a
I
police
don't
officer.
know the answer to that.
Yeah,
But from a zoning perspective, that's what I wanted to let you know.
We use the example of a wedding. You can have a wedding in your private home.
I guess, well, this is a little bit different, right? Because we're saying, well, you're trying to say that we just go once and see how it goes. But really what we're saying is you could do this at least annually and perhaps more than once annually.
I think our language can say the first year you can have one large event
Right.
and we monitor it and see how it goes, and then
then we'll determine future events from
we
there.
can turn it down after that.
I just think if my neighbor had 150 people over for a wedding, especially if I weren't invited.
Usually invite your neighbors.
It's gonna be loud.
I lean more towards, the test run is interesting, but I still lean more towards just the events are just one request too many. They're big. And it embodies all of the concerns that we tried to tackle with the gatherings, and maybe the gatherings don't have really those concerns because it's so small. But it's 6 times bigger. And that's a lot. And so that's
It is.
where, and I understand your point. I get it.
But it's 6 acres.
I get it. I know all the numbers. I got it all. Doesn't need to be repeated. I just think that's the one that transforms this request from, I think, what was originally intended in the regulations to something different. It's a lot. Even once a year, it's a lot. It's not. The wedding is a great example. That's a once in a lifetime event. You're happy for it. This would be every year. Everyone's getting ready to leave if it's noisy. Now, if the testing is this something we can talk about separate. But I think first is understanding if we're aligned with the idea that we have the alignment that no events is where we start, and then discuss whether we should try one to see if we're wrong. But it's a slightly different perspective, but the idea is that, no, the events are too much. But maybe we need to prove ourselves wrong. But I still fall in that it's too much. I'm trying to find the middle ground here and battling a little bit at the same time.
I mean, I suppose, Bob, to that point, you could think about keeping everything small the first year.
Mhm.
You know, so do it incrementally with controls,
That's basically their plan, their
guardrails in
idea of plan,
place.
right?
So,
It's
you
2
know,
of these, 3 of
let's
these,
try
and
this
see how
the
it goes.
first
Yep.
year, let's try this the second year. As opposed to, I mean, I'm okay with trying one 150 person event and see how it goes and monitoring it. I think that's a great idea. But I can also see where you're coming from, Bob, of just sort of start small and get bigger.
So could we, for Aaron, could we say, let's draft the condition, and this would be the proposed condition, y'all can tear it apart. But the proposed condition would be that events would not be allowed pending a test event, or the thing is, I don't like the test event either, because you can game the system. You know,
But we
it's,
can monitor it.
I know, but what if
I
they?
think you would have to word that differently, Bob, if you were looking to allow for one event and the applicant to return following the first operational year.
Can I just offer something? Maybe a little bit of a twist of this compromise thing. I'd be more inclined to do a trial with the smaller gatherings, whatever, I keep messing up the operational definition, and
That's
see
it.
how that goes before we start allowing it to expand 6x. Maybe that's a better trial than starting off with the full McGilla, and then if something happens, it's like, holy shit. Sorry. Yeah, sorry.
Remember, this is recorded now.
Yeah, I know. Just a
No,
thought,
that's
just a
actually
suggestion.
But all of it can be shut down after a review by the board, by the commission. So even if you do the 25, you can shut it down. If you do the 150, you can shut it down.
Well, not
No,
exactly,
not really.
Mike. When a special exception is for a certain amount. It's if there are operational issues or non-compliance or violations. I mean, we can read through this specifics, but a special exception, when you allow will run with the land. You have the opportunity to, one, reduce the scale. So if you wanted to have one trial event per year, you can say, or for the first year, you can have one event and you could cap it at 100 people if you'd like. You can try the full at 150. You have flexibility there. And the applicant would be allowed to return to you
That's-
to
okay.
seek further approvals
That's my point.
to, in the future. You can limit this and allow the applicant the opportunity to,
So to the other compromise that was proposed, we could say gatherings are allowed with whatever constraints you want to put on, one a week or whatever you want. Gatherings are allowed, and that based on the review of the performance of the gatherings, the impact, we could, but no events, with the idea that once the gatherings are completed, we do an assessment, have the applicant come back to request the addition of a large event. It's kind of what, that makes no sense.
that's a mouthful.
That's a mouthful. That video was.
It's, again, I understand, sure, we're trying to figure out how to compromise, make this work. And the idea makes sense. The concern I have, again, goes back to, I think the theme John mentioned earlier too, is like, we just talked about, well, if you meet these conditions, we'd have to have very specific conditions.
Yeah.
Otherwise, someone comes back and says,
Agreed.
well, I thought that was a success, and someone
Yeah.
else thinks that's a failure, So
Yeah.
how do we, it just becomes a subjective, he
No,
said, she said.
You don't allow it to be subjective. You have metrics in place of some way of measuring how it was, and we determine that collectively.
I understand, but that would have to be a condition. We have to decide those up front. So it has to, the event, in order to pass, for lack of a better term, has to meet the following conditions.
Like noise levels, light levels.
Exactly, otherwise,
Agreed.
we'll be arguing with each
Well,
other.
that's similar to what is in the operational plan. Whether there were any violations, orders, judgments, any other notices issued by any other governmental entity, agency, federal, state, local, that the applicant, is in violation of the special exception or any other applicable law, rule, regulation, which has, was issued since the filing of the prior,
Plan.
the operating plan.
Yeah, we can't just.
So
come
that
up with our
means
own
that
set of
governs, any other regulatory agencies in the community or the state. I don't know what,
No, but that means we can't come up with our own set of metrics of, what's a successful event versus a non-successful event as far as its criteria. It has to follow.
typically that's, it's complaint based. If there's noise complaints, if you hear from the police department, if there's traffic impact, those kinds of things.
Yep, no,
You get a call.
Yeah, I
If
get
there's
it.
a complaint about something.
Okay, back to that game in the system thing.
But it's also true
Well,
of any
I think it-
residential use. If you have a loud party and your neighbors can't get to sleep, you're gonna call the police.
Yep,
There,
Right, well, I think in this situation, right, you're almost inviting complaints, but the 150 is just pushing the envelope, right? So even in their calendar, they're talking about maybe one fundraiser, I think in June. In the previous conversations or testimony, we talked about the country school up the road. And the country school is a lot bigger. Country school has a fundraiser. They have it at a country club or a yacht club.
Yeah.
So it's not even that much of a burden on the applicant to give that up. I think it's a big deal for the neighborhood.
I keep falling back to what you're saying.
And I think that is where we'll have to draw the line.
Yeah.
And 25, I think, is pretty easy. And that's really not that different, in my opinion, from two big houses.
Yeah.
But the 150 is a big deal and a big difference.
Oh, I agree.
Even though I could have a wedding in my backyard, I can't imagine getting approval to do it every year. I can't imagine my neighbors being happy with that. So,
well, I can see my way.
Same one.
So we should eliminate the big events.
I think so.
Thanks, so.
John Morgan?
So if I'm the Tremaine Foundation, I'm kind of coming into this expecting to be able to do big events. At what point does it make, does a special exception not even make sense here? I mean, it feels like from what the testimony, the Tremaine Foundation by right could operate it similar to a B&B with 6 people or 4 or 6 people, I forgot the exact number, based on if it's a normal home run business, we really can't regulate the number of meetings that that business has. If someone has a big event, as we said, there's no regulation, Aaron, about a big event taking place. Oh, it almost sounds like this special exception is going to handcuff the Tremaine Foundation more than just going in and being a resident in the home.
Except right now, we're just talking about events, right? So they're proposing 3 in a calendar year. So that's all we're talking about, is these big events,
Right.
of which they want to have 3.
But his point, I think, is at what point does it no longer make sense for them to go forward with this? So are we willing to put so many constraints on it that they bail?
Well, you
But
have,
that's not really our concern.
That's up to them.
No, that's up to them. Your concern should be that the conditions you place on an approval are based on evidence that is in the record. So if you are limiting or eliminating the events of 150 people, come into the record and state your reasons why. The applicant has the right, as with any applicant who receives an approval or a denial from you, to appeal a decision to Superior Court. So you do have to, as well as aggrieved parties. So you need to make sure that the reasons you're doing something is substantiated by the record. And if you're thoughtful in that process and it's supported, then that is, in my opinion, within your
That's right. I think
ability.
the events are the ones that we could support eliminating. The gatherings and meetings are much more challenging because they are they are much more lower impact. And maybe that's where we end up.
Well, I agree with you on substantiating it, right? So I mean, our only substantiation on the noise concern for 150 is that the applicant hasn't shown us that they could do it at decibel level 55 or less. It's true that the neighbors haven't said that it would definitely be above, but they're asking us to approve something which we don't have any evidence one way or the other, except to say that common sense suggests if you got 150 people together, it's going to exceed 55 decibels 100 yards away. And what we suggested here is, well, we could do a trial run. Well, I guess we could, if we're gonna stand out there with a little noise meter and see what it shows.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly the point.
And a light engineer with a light meter.
There are light regulations in our zoning code anyways, as far as off lighting onto adjacent properties. But you could potentially condition one event of a year and require the applicant to provide documentation to you
Data.
that the noise levels didn't exceed such and such as the applicant proposed this information to you. They self-imposed this condition of a noise, a maximum decibel. So if you allow something subject to that condition that they gave you and request that they provide that information to you, then that's the onus on the applicant to do that after the event and show documentation.
Well, but then you're asking us to approve something that they haven't shown that could happen within the condition that they're suggesting. It'd be one thing if they said, hey, we went down to the glass house and 200 yards away from a big event of 150 people, it was 54 decibels, but that's not what we heard. Right? We heard that that's the condition at the glass house where there's 49 acres. I mean, for example, you could go to the farm dinner where there's 100 people or more and have some evidence and say, look, they did it there and it was 55 decibels, a quarter mile away or closer, but that's not what we heard. I'm just saying that there's no evidence to support that in the record.
There's not evidence to support that it
Either way.
But it's a limitation that says it
It's a
cannot
condition.
exceed this. So that is the responsibility of the applicant when holding that event to ensure that whatever's happening or that event has to be structured to be, a less intense event, something that's not a noise generator. Perhaps it's there were, the events include indoor and outdoor experiences. It could be a reception, an open house, a presentation, a lecture, a class, or an exhibit in which folks, so they may be different generators, but you could require that condition be placed that the applicant ensure that during this event, noise levels at the property line do not exceed this.
And that they're
to
monitored.
and to provide some documentation. I mean, my assumption is that in order to comply with that, the applicant's gonna have to have someone who has a decibel reader and is trained to use it and can provide documentation.
Agree.
That's,
Not a free app.
It is a free app.
but I mean, you have to, you have to,
It's close, but it's not.
let's, yeah, we're not, this is not a back and forth with
Right,
the
okay.
audience.
So I think
Quite a weaker.
I'm circling back to what Mike posed of give them one big event and monitor it. Okay, so you're saying no?
No, I'm saying
No, that's,
Don't start. Yeah. Exactly.
any other thoughts?
Well, in principle, that's a good idea, except I just think that given the specific site and the proximity of the houses, that common sense suggests that that's going to be very, very unlikely to happen with 150 guests.
We need more than common sense, I think, to back it up.
Yeah.
I've heard three different things. Is this 55 dB at the property line?
Yes, it's actually, there's a state regulation I found, which
Okay.
I need some help interpreting, so I was gonna ask our town council to guide us on it, but this is
Yeah, the perimeter of the property.
section 22A-67, the whole thing, it says 55 decibels. And it is an emitter and receiver and it kind of properly.
Okay.
As we said, the town does not have a noise ordinance.
I know,
This is-
that's why I look for the state.
This is, we have to look into what's in the record, and and this is something that was volunteered by the
Yeah,
applicant.
I know.
And so that's where you can impose this reporting is.
I don't think we will ever know one way or the other without evidence. We have
And the same with lighting at the property line shall not exceed 2.2 lumens per square foot.
Traffic, how are we gonna make it that?
Well, the other issue that comes up with the 150 is the portable toilets, right? So that doesn't have to happen for 25 people. It does have to happen for everyone.
Sure,
150.
I agree with that.
But you're right, I mean, the opposition did not present evidence to suggest that 55 is impossible. So strictly looking at the record, that's not there. I guess the common sense and consideration would suggest that that's pushing it too far. That might not stand up to legal scrutiny, but that's my thought.
No, I agree. And I think there was something in there about, I forget the exact wording about it. The use of it's detrimental to the neighborhood and everything like that. I think, 10 people, no. Arguably, 150 people, yes. That's impactful. That will be
It's
noticeable.
potentially impactful, I agree. Not definitive.
Again, depends on how you want to measure it, but
We have no measurements.
but it's you have to argue, you have to agree that there is an impact above and beyond what's there, just by definition of 150
There's
people.
potential. And I agree that there's potential.
I disagree.
Well, I don't think we're all gonna come to complete agreement tonight, but I think it's worth drafting what we've got so far. Erin, do you feel that you have enough? We haven't gone through all of the conditions. I think there's 3 more pages of them, but
We're making progress and we need to.
we're making some progress.
I would like some feedback if you can, or at least some discussion on the residencies, if you had any comments on that or any.
The only comment I have on it is to seek guidance from the town council. Because
On what?
if we approve it, if we approve the residencies as it's defined, it's pulling a bunch of different things together. It's pulling you can let two people, it's pulling the B&B regulations into it. It's pulling into what you can do if you own a home. It does a lot of things. There's the request to put people into the barn, which is, I'm not sure of the right terminology, but accessory building, which then requires other requirements with respect to that, as far as the resident being there. There's a lot of language around having that many people, paying and unpaying, staying in a home, which I don't understand. And what I really want is,
I don't understand what your question is.
I'm not sure if we are superseding currently existing town regulations with respect to what you can or cannot do for residencies in a home by approving all those.
What you have an application before you that is defined within this special exception.
Right.
When that use is allowed by special exception, it's not
I'm
in conflict
I'm
with
just
an
asking, what I'm
underlying
asking
zone.
asking is for us to get some guidance from the town council, to say, yes, they're asking for this is what's normally allowed. Here's some potential conflict, if any, between the request and what's typically allowed. So then we can go into this knowing that. Otherwise, I have no idea what I'm approving. I have no idea if that's typically allowed by the regulations. I just don't. I tried reading.
There's no
That's why it's a special,
I know, but there's no baseline that he can compare to, I think is your point.
There's
So you
two
mean a
places-
single family house,
There
we
are
have a
two-
definition of family.
No, there are 2 places in the regulations that talk about B&Bs. And I can't reconcile the 2 different definitions of it. One requires a frontage on Boston Post Road, the other one doesn't. There's something in the regulations with respect to allowing someone to stay in an outhouse.
Outer building.
Outer building, thank you.
Thank you.
That there's
Accessory dwelling.
specific regulations with respect to that. So we're bringing all those together and saying, yes, it's okay. People can stay in the barn, you can have paying people here, you can have non-paying people here. I want to understand if the town has anticipated each of those individually, what the expectation would be of the homeowner to do that. And then are we having that same expectation of the Tremaine Foundation? Are we adding liability to the town, or are we just superseding what's currently understood? And I'm not explaining it well because I don't understand it.
Right, well, so my understanding of the residencies is no more than 8 people. And that goes
And
to,
they've capped it as 8 people for 6 bedrooms.
right, and so when you look at our zoning regulations for a single family or a family is defined as no more than 6 unrelated. So that is an as of right in a single family zone. And additionally, you are allowed to have 2 borders. And that is essentially where that 8 came from.
I get that. I just want our attorney to tell us it's okay. I'm not comfortable approving that without someone telling me it's cool. You get it. You're explaining it well.
Okay.
I just want the legal person to sign off on it.
I think it's.
Because it's something I don't understand.
I mean, they're gonna sign up on everything we decide.
They're gonna review
Before we
the,
put it together,
Yeah.
let us know. So we can know if they have a glitch somewhere, we can then address it. My assumption is that it's fine.
It's included in the philanthropic use that's before you.
I know.
So you have that authority to.
I just want someone
Review
to tell me.
I think it's
Doing
right.
something stupid.
I have another point on that. Assuming everything's within regulation and it goes through, I do think, and I brought this up at the very first meeting back in March, I do think that for these residents that come in, they should background checks done on those people. And I would think that the foundation would want to do that to protect themselves. Today.
Wasn't that already addressed?
Yeah, I think
They
it is.
mentioned that they said that they wouldn't have a problem with it, but it was not in the original application. I don't,
Oh,
I'm
it's
not
not
doing
in
doc
the- it's not
comparisons,
here
so I don't
yet,
know
yeah.
if it was.
It wasn't
I
captured.
see it.
It was-
Okay. Okay.
So that's
There's
fair.
language that states participants shall be selected by a peer jury or similar type of committee appointed by the applicant. These mission-based residencies will be supported through the philanthropic dollars.
I'm talking about a third-party background check. That's, like you do when an employer
When you hire
hires, you go
someone.
through a third-party background check and the results come back and that's
That
it.
I would say should be a question for our attorney. If
Yeah.
it's
Right.
a condition that's able to be imposed by the planning and
I'm
zoning
sure the
commission.
answer is no, it's not. I'm just saying,
Let's find out.
I'm, because there's B and Bs in town and there's Airbnbs and everything else, and I know they don't ask for. I'm
We
just
don't
saying,
regulate
it might be in their
Airbnbs.
best interest, that's all. Because anybody can sue for anything at any time, regardless of what's on the books.
The last two, we talked about the kitchen, the service kitchen, the ancillary or the fundraising activities. That was when the question was raised by the commission of what was the percentage of fundraising versus philanthropic events on the property. And so that was spelled out in a little more detail in item 6 under their ancillary development and fundraising activities. So that was A, B, and C, and the percentage of, with the events, it was up to 2 of the 3 events could be for fundraising for the foundation, up to 1 of the gatherings per month could be dedicated to a day-long corporate style retreat or a filming or a photo shoot on site. And then the, out of the experienced guests, those would be the weekend rentals, up to 25% of the annual on-site residencies, excluding staff, could be dedicated to the experienced guests. So that was clarified in the closing statements as well. And then the last one, number 8, was the signage not to exceed 6 square feet. But I do believe that was addressed both in our regulations as of right of 2 square feet. And I think that was a recommendation also from
From
Nina,
SLR.
It is.
the planner, to reduce that square footage.
Yeah.
And then, your last big conversation is this annual operating plan. I don't know if you've all read through that extensively, if you have questions, if you want to get into some conditions I don't know if you're running out of steam tonight, if you want to get into that, or if you'd like to get some conditions on paper for the next meeting on the 3rd, and then kind of work through that operating.
Yeah, I think
Is
the
it the
operating
third?
plan is gonna be a big discussion. I'm not crazy about saddling us
Not the 3rd, the 19th. I'm
with that
sorry.
every year.
I just lost half.
I'd
of
rather
my-
just say this is what you're allowed to do it.
This is our first meeting of September.
I know. I was jumping to October.
Please don't.
That was
We
it.
have a
Let's get it
19th
done.
meeting.
September's my favorite month. I don't know why I did that. I'm sorry. But in 2 weeks, we can bring back if you'd like. You do have time for that. I know everybody wants to move forward. This has been a long process, but this is a thoughtful process and a necessary process to go through as part of your
No,
deliberations.
without
to make
question,
sure
without
you're-
question. I have looked at 1 or 2 other ones, just not for discussion, but just to get on everyone's radar, so please think about it. One is reference is really bad, but it's section 1, it's in the conditions in appendix A. Roman numeral 1C3. There is a condition in there that the property has to maintain a minimum size of 5 acres. I'm not sure why we need to allow the property to sell off an acre.
They can't rezone it in some way.
I don't know. I don't know what I'm not sure what the ask is hidden inside of that.
Okay.
So we need to think about whether we want to allow that or just strike that.
Okay.
So the other one was Roman numeral C, 1C9. I am running out of steam. There's a condition there saying that all of these, that the special exception will stay in place as long as the property is owned by a nonprofit. It's my understanding that the special exception travels with the property, runs with the land. That's the phrase. I couldn't think of the phrase. So if it's sold to a for-profit entity, does this special exemption run with it? The land is the land, regardless of who owns it. So I guess that, to me, that was another one of those questions for the town.
An
council.
attorney
Yeah.
question? I mean, this is a self-imposed,
I know, but can we even impose that? I don't know. I haven't been doing this very long. I haven't seen anything like that.
Good question.
What's the question again?
If
So
a
there's
for-profit
there's
should-
a, it's 1C9.
the special exception permit shall remain valid
I'm not sure we can say that.
so long as the
Everyone's
site is
saying
owned by a
the
tax
land's
exempt
not owned,
organization.
the land's not owned. So I need an attorney to tell me about.
Yeah, but whoever owns it still has to comply with the zoning regulation, so
The conditions,
if a restaurant is trying to move there, it's not.
Yeah, sure, I just,
They can't, so they can't.
whether we keep that or just strike, and then you're right, then it's,
And on this, I think the 5 acres is just saying they're not gonna subdivide it. That's what they're saying.
okay, well then let's make it that.
Which- Beneficial.
Yeah, that's good, no, that's fine, yeah. I was taking it from the other side, which is going to sell off.
Can't do anything with acres, okay.
I think I'm reading 9 as an opportunity to be more restrictive and protective of how
Yes,
this
That was
runs
the
with
intention, so it's a
land.
good intention, I want to make sure it's an allowable
Right.
intention. Because I haven't, in
Valid
my
point.
short time, seen that,
Yeah, it's a valid point.
I'm sure it is, but. If we're gonna go after the whole noise thing, we should have someone translate the Connecticut statute on noise for us so we can read it, understand it.
What-
Indoor square walls.
It's in there.
What do you need interpretation of that?
If
for?
we go down the path of
Connecticut state noise.
statutes, chapter 442, noise pollution control, section 22A-67,
But what about it?
it's dense.
But
It speaks specific to the decibel level at property lines. Is it applicable in this instance?
in
It
this
is.
instance, the applicant is specifically volunteering a
This
decibel
has all,
level at
this
the
has all
property
of the
line.
regulations on how to measure it. How to make sure it's done correctly. It would be a lot easier to say, do this. Than have an open-ended 55 zone. If this is applicable.
But we don't have a way to do that, is what you're saying.
Yeah.
Today, we don't have a way, unless the town made some sort of technological investment. Right? You have to buy, we have to buy a piece of tech.
The town doesn't have a noise ordinance, and
Yeah.
so the
So
town
defaults
will
to
not
state.
Well, the
be.
town has a noise ordinance, it's a state ordinance.
State.
All this town says that, anything they don't regulate is regulated by the state. And then federal. I found it. It answers one of the questions. We don't have, I mean.
also would
L15
ban
rates
all
how low
the
the
leaf
C
blowers.
I don't, so I think it's important that you focus on the information that's in the record. Where, and we're not
Okay.
bringing in new information.
Okay,
For the
then
deliberation.
I now know where measuring effectively, so
What's that?
He can measure noise now.
it's late. I'm getting started. I'm sorry.
But sure.
You are correct, though.
So Erin, you have enough to draft or begin a draft?
Sure, I can put some of this language together in a motion, a draft resolution that then I will get to you before the meeting, and then once we get to the meeting on the 19th, you'll be able to make some edits for that. And I will try to have our attorney take a read through it, so before that meeting.
Thank
for you.
That's a great idea.
Thank you.
I haven't counted the days out, Erin, from when we closed the public hearing.
Well, you have 65 days, so it's essentially 2 months from,
Yeah, from August 15th.
we closed on the 15th,
Yep.
so you're well within your time, you're fine.
October. Is it business day or calendar days?
It's calendar days, but we typically schedule it for regular meetings without having to schedule a special meeting.
Thanks. Okay, well,
We would need a table.
we need to have a motion to table our deliberation to September 19th. John, second. Any further discussion? John Morgan, you're hearing us too?
Chairman.
Good.
Okay. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right, thanks, everybody. A lot of good thoughts.
Okay.
We have a few more. I think we can run through the rest of the agenda
Ms.
pretty
Mannix,
quickly.
can you just clarify what you're asking for? I am staffed in admission and we're still in the middle. Okay, so I'm not having a conversation with you now. Madam Chair?
Yes.
Excuse me. The commission is still meeting. There's no interaction between the attendees and staff or the commission. There's still additional business on the agenda. So if you can
Have a nice evening, everybody. Thank you.
take your conversations into the hallway. Be
And our lawsuits.
So
You know-
things to mostly table.
I'm sorry. I have to say that
No.
I spent my life,
Larry,
spent my life here
walk away.
building this property and
Walk
not to have
away.
a say.
That's enough.
I will,
It's enough. Thank you.
That's
Doug.
enough.
and you are bought and paid for.
You guys have no integrity. Please.
Thank you for leaving.
You have not heard the end of me. I'm telling you right
Larry,
now.
don't do this in the middle of a meeting, please.
Please don't. This is my
This
property.
is
This
a
is my
meeting,
life.
And we will adjourn and
This
have an
is-
officer come and escort you out
That
of the
would be
meeting.
wonderful because
Please leave the meeting or sit quietly so the commission can continue their work. Don't be disrespectful.
oh, like you have not.
Disrespected the entire town.
You should be ashamed of yourself. Shame on you.
Close the door, please.
Yeah,
Would you
like
mind-
up to your servant.
All right, I'm gonna close the door.
Okay. Chris is.
Thank you. Hold it in all night, I guess.
Okay, so
Next.
John, you're still there?
I am. I'm here.
Okay, 24-26 Over Shores Drive East. This is a coastal site plan, and we would like to have a motion to table it to the September 19th meeting.
This one actually already is tabled.
Oh, thanks, Erin.
From our last meeting, it was received at the last,
That's right.
just a coastal site plan for the 35 days.
Just a heads up then.
Correct. And Middle Beach Road is the next one, 24-27. That's another coastal site plan and has been referred to deep. And so that's just giving the 35 days.
So pending deed, but should we schedule it for the September 19th?
Yes.
Okay, so motion to table that to September 19th.
Provide the motion.
Second. Discussion, all in favor? Okay. 24-28, 454 Horse Pond Road, there are two of them that need. One is a public hearing, so we need to schedule the public hearing for September 19th. Have a motion? Andy, second?
Is that a quick one? That's gonna be a quick one, right?
I hope so. Let's see. And then 24-29, again, 454 Horse Pond Road. This
This is a public hearing, yes, scheduled for September 19th.
the second part of Horse Pond Road is also public hearing, or is it?
No, the
It's a subdivision.
subdivision, right, so if the public hearing extends beyond the 19th, you can then at that meeting date table it
Okay,
to a future date.
but for now, we can table the second part, 24-29 to September 19th, right?
Yes.
Okay. Motion? Table. Thank you, John. Second. Thank you, Jeff. All in favor? Okay. Then we're in receipt of some new applications, 24-31, 21 and 29 Milano Pond Drive. Again, receipt and table to September 19th. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
John, thank you.
Second.
Mike, second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, 24-32 Longshore Lane. We're in receipt and we're gonna table that to October 3rd.
Okay.
Do you have a motion? John, thank you. Mike, second. Discussion? All in favor?
It's a lot of
Okay.
coastal site plans, so it looks like a very large agenda, but a lot of these are fairly straightforward administrative approvals.
Okay, 24-35, 21 Circle Beach Road. Again, this is a sewage disposal system for a structure that's already there, but they need the coastal site plan. So table to October 3rd. John?
Motion.
Thank you. Mike, second. Discussion, all in favor? We got it. One more. 24-36, 916 Boston Post Road. This is the general residence coming back to modify coastal access agreement to
this is-
previously approved public viewing area.
This is the ice machine thing?
No, it's the general's residence.
Oh, the general's
Downtown.
So
Oh,
we're
yeah,
gonna
I see.
schedule a public hearing for October 3rd. Can I have a motion?
Motion.
John, Andy, you get the second.
All right, Andy, you got one in there, buddy.
Thank you. All in favor? All right. Aaron, you want to talk about the administrative approval for 24-31 Durham Road?
Yes, this is the pediatrician's office up on Durham Road, and minor site, met the definition of minor site plan modification to install 2 EV chargers in their side parking lot. And so typically those minor approvals, if they're exterior improvements, would go before ACA. And with ACA's favorable recommendation, then that can be done through staff. But there is a requirement to report back to you and let you know when these administrative approvals occur. So
Okay.
that's what we're doing.
Okay.
Will those be available for public access?
For public use,
Public use?
that's a good question. I don't know.
I mean, I'm just wondering, kind of check your.
There's not, there
Anyone
are
just
not
park
many
there?
in North Madison, to be honest. The town just installed quite a bit, but they
Did they get
are,
some up in North Madison?
no.
No,
Not yet.
that's the thing, I'm saying, there's neighbors that are walking distance of their homes, I mean, they could just park their cars there at night, charge up. And if it's free, if it's charge, it's
It
a
might
credit card
charge.
thing, then it's
It might
it's
charge.
not an issue, but otherwise,
Yeah.
It's worth reaching out to them to ask.
yeah, they're gonna worry about, exactly, otherwise the electric bill will go through the roof. Assuming it's not a tower coming in off the street.
Yeah, I can email them. They're in the employee lot, so I'm not sure.
Oh, that's it. Employee law.
Moving on to approval of minutes, Secretary John Juzet.
Sure, August 15th, 2024, on the zoning commission meeting, members present Downs, Duza, Bugda, Morgan, Peckinpah, Reinhardt, Rubin, and Snow. Motion to approve. Carol, second, Michael, any edits or
Yeah.
corrections?
A couple edits on our names.
Yes. Oh, so
Sean instead of Snow.
there's a Shaw instead of Snow.
And there's a Bugba.
So it's on page 1, there's a Shaw instead of Snow, there's a Downs without an E,
Oh, I didn't catch that
there's
one.
a Reinhardt without a D. Page 4 and 5, there's a Bugba,
Yeah, there's Bugbas.
Close.
so B.
I'll-
I've seen that one before.
I'll send, Terry's our new clerk for our 3rd meeting of the month, so I'll make sure she gets an accurate list for your names.
So
Make sure,
Michael,
yeah.
Michael needs a
And don't forget the
B.
D in Reinhardt.
Yeah.
It's all or nothing.
So the second B should be D. And then last on page
Got
5, it says that Commissioner Bugda abstained from continuing the meeting. It was in fact Commissioner